Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and thank you for coming. This is the West Point Firewise 2026 workshopping event on wildfire safety, home protection and defense, hazard mitigation. I think we have a good program for you. The program is broken up into segments, and so it's a full morning plus an afternoon session. And if that's too much for you, you are free to come and go and attend only the sessions that are most interesting to you. We'll start with a little bit of an introduction, and then at 10 o'clock our workshop is going to be on defensible space. At 11 o'clock we're having a workshop on home hardening. There's going to be a lunch break. Lions will be selling some lunch items there, and we'll have two presentations during the lunch hour, brief talks. 1 o'clock, the Resource Conservation District is going to be organizing a community discussion, a roundtable for everyone in the community to talk about wildfire hazard situations, any concerns that you might have, and what is going on to potentially try to address some of those hazards and deal with them and increase wildfire protection for the entire West Point community. So welcome, please find seats, please feel comfortable, and we're going to get started. Bob, could you let us have the lights, please? Hopefully you are comfortably safe and can still see the screen all at the same time. The purpose of this event is in large part to convince you that you can protect your home from wildfire. That doesn't mean that there's a guarantee that your home will always be undamaged by wildfire, but it means that there's a great deal that you can do to improve the odds of surviving a wildfire. And if you do everything that's recommended, the odds are pretty good that you will get through a wildfire. So the program, I just ran through it again, but right now we're having a little welcome and introduction, talk a little bit about Firewise. We're going to do the defensible space workshop at 10, home hardening workshop at 11, lunch break and some brief talks from the Water District and from OES. And then 1 o'clock, I think very importantly, so let your friends and neighbors know, the community discussion on area-wide protections from wildfire. I want to thank a few people who helped out here with sound, projector, with photocopying, with publicity, with the food that the Lions Kitchen is going to provide, and a variety of things. We want to thank the West Point Lions for the use of the hall, which we are allowed to do for free because we are a volunteer public service nonprofit community organization. And I just want to take a minute here. Could all the Lions here wave hands so people can see? If you look around, you'll see half a dozen Lions Club members here. Every year the Lions has to come up with about $5,000 in funds raised from our community to keep this hall running, to keep the lights on, to keep the water on, to keep the propane on, so that you can not only have community events and town halls and private functions, but this is also our county designated emergency shelter. And this is a designated cooling center during heat waves, and it looks like heat waves will be more likely based on the way that ocean temperatures are shaping up this summer. So you may see us open a cooling center. This is also an emergency shelter. It can serve as a dormitory shelter for 32 people and 4 staff. And often we get help from county agencies like OES and HHS and Red Cross. We had PG&E in here as a resource center, but we are also preparing to serve the community and meet community needs during emergencies if no agencies are able to come and assist us. We've made a lot of progress on that recently. So any support you can give to Lions Club to keep this hall operational has many benefits, but public safety is one of the most important ones. Who's here with us today? Autumn, could you give a wave? Autumn Andal is our District 2 County Supervisor. Chief Stephen Hewlett. We also have Chief Mike Downs here today. The Resource Conservation District crew will be coming later to run the roundtable community discussion in the afternoon. We have representatives from the Fire Safe Council. Bill Fullerton was not able to come today, but Fire Safe Council people, could you stand up and raise your hands and introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Terry Woodrow. I'm part of the Fire Safe Council, and we also have somebody that you might know.
Hi, my name's Tim Tate. I'm also with the Fire Safe Council.
So we have applications here for the seniors defensible space program, seniors and or disabled defensible space program. So
Could you speak up a little bit, please? Could you speak up a little bit?
sure, I can speak up.
Very nice.
Yes,
Thank you.
okay. So I have forms here for the seniors for defensible space program for disabled people also. So we have forms here for that. So feel free to pick up an application. And it's for the 100-foot defensible space.
Thank you. So you can talk to these folks from the Fire Safe Council about the program, and you can pick up application forms if you know someone who would qualify as being senior or disabled and needs some free assistance preparing their property to meet the defensible space zones out to 100 feet. The application forms are here. I'm going to ask Autumn to come up, and while she's walking, I'll just mention that 3 local volunteer organizations are involved here today. West Point Firewise is putting on this event with support from others, and our mission is to raise awareness of wildfire hazards and how to meet them head on, how to mitigate those hazards, and how to make your property and your community safer. We also engage with agencies to do that on a larger scale. West Point BMEPC, Blue Mountain Emergency Preparedness Committee, is more generally concerned about readiness and preparedness and emergency response here for the entire community. And we are working on plans right now to bring the community to a higher state of readiness in case we have another big snowstorm or another winter storm. BMEPC also worked with Lions Club to stock this hall with about $10,000 worth of supplies and equipment in case there is an emergency where this would be our last line of defense for feeding and sheltering members of the community. And finally, the West Point Lions Club, they do many good deeds here in the community, but as I mentioned, operating this hall for the benefit of the community in many ways is a big deal. We have donation jars for all 3 of these agencies over here, community volunteer organizations over here. And if you like what we're doing and you'd like to support us, you'll find those jars over there, along with the massive safety literature that we assembled for this event. Right now, I'd like to ask Autumn Andal, our supervisor, to just say a few words of welcome.
Thank you, Rick. Good morning, everybody. I'm Autumn Andal. I serve as your District 2 Calaveras supervisor. I'd like to begin with a brief update on our Office of Emergency Services in Calaveras County. It has transitioned back to the Sheriff's Department, which was a previous model. It landed in their laps during the February storms, and they jumped in to coordinate. They have since organized and structured a little more, and later today you'll hear from Nicole Wade, who's here, who's the sergeant that will be leading that program. He will also be sharing about our Calaveras Hazard Mitigation Plan. I urge you to check that out. It has a survey up right now that's open until May 1st. And your input is vital, specifically in this West Point area where we know that we can be isolated and we face a lot of severe winter weather and wildfire risk. So please check that out. There's also an in-person meeting down at the Government Center on Tuesday, May 19th at 5:30 p.m. And that's in Building A, which is the Board of Supervisors overflow chamber. So if you're able to come to that in person, share a voice from up here in West Point, that would be valuable. Our county administration team, as we transition OES, will continue working with our grant writer on fuel mitigation projects. We have a lot of ideas, and I'm proud of our partnerships with the Resource Conservation District and the Fire Safe Council. It's definitely at the forefront in our county. In addition to being your county supervisor, I serve with the Upper McCallamy River Watershed Authority. primarily on federal land and in that wild urban interface area. It's been primarily along the Highway 88 corridor, and it will be moving over in the next phase into the Calaveras Ranger District. So that's exciting to see that momentum and movement of fire prevention. I would like to thank Rick and these groups that you've mentioned. I think that what's happening here in West Point is ahead of its time in a lot of communities within Calaveras County. And I appreciate the momentum. The Firewise community has really taken charge. This is the second one in District 2. There's been one in Sheep Ranch for a number of years. And I would like to see this momentum spreading across District 2 and across Calaveras County. So thank you, Rick, and your team. And thank you all.
Thank you, Autumn. Autumn and all the people that I've mentioned here have been very supportive of what we're doing, and we're grateful for everything they can do for us. I did not mention Kelly Gerkensmeyer from CCWD yet, but Kelly will be giving us a brief talk about CCWD with a focus on West Point and also on the role of the water district in terms of providing water for fire protection. And Cole Waite is here from OES. He's going to give a brief talk on what OES is up to right now, and he'll mention the zone system. If you would like to find out what your evacuation zone is within the county, Cole is set up over there and he can help you do that. Those two short talks will be during the lunch hour after we have time to buy hot dogs or whatever the Lions will be selling for lunch. That food sale is a fundraiser to keep the lights on here in the hall. Okay, the first few minutes of the event today, I'd just like to update you about Firewise here in West Point. We have one Firewise community now in West Point, and I think that this is the first of several, at least that's my hope. But we've got an official one set up now for all the parcels west of town between the North Fork and the Middle Fork. That's about 275 parcels, probably 550 people, roughly. Those properties are in the program, but it's a voluntary program. If you are not interested in it, just close your eyes and it goes away. But if you are interested and you're lucky enough to be within the boundaries of that first Firewise community, you are already eligible for a discount on your fire insurance premium. And under the Cal Fair plan, or the California Fair plan, which I think most properties have now been forced to use for insurance, that premium discount annually is 4%. 6 months ago it was 10%, but the state allowed them to knock it down. However, at the same time, they made it easier to get all of the add-on discounts. And so you can actually get up to about 15.5% if you do some safety steps. And that's all explained on a handout that's on the back table there. We got a ton of handouts, and I hope you'll check them out. And this Firewise community, the first one in West Point, is in good standing from November 25th of last year through December 31st of this year. So 13 and a half months. And when I sent in my certificate, I got a credit retroactive back to November 25th. So I hope everybody will have the same experience. If you haven't given one of those certificates to your insurance agent now, I would recommend that you do that. It's very simple. In October 2026, I want to have a party for West Point Firewise. Maybe we'll do a barbecue if the weather is great. Maybe we'll have cake for our birthday celebration. But what we want to do in October is ask all the participating residents to bring in some information about their fire protection and home improvement activities for the year. And in November, our administrative team, Anita, Lanny, Greg, could you raise your hands? This is the Firewise team that set up the West Point West Firewise. You can talk to them about it, and we had a big boost from Chief Hewlett of CAL FIRE as well. We need to report on an annual basis that we've been doing good deeds, and it's not going to be hard to satisfy the mothership of Firewise to get our certificate renewed for next year. But we do need to ask the community to bring in information about what they've been up to. I'll show you some forms that we have in a minute. And what is West Point Firewise? Well, it's basically just a concept where our team, will support other neighborhoods to develop their own Firewise communities in and around West Point. If you feel left out, if you're here but you're not a member of the West Point West community, we will assist you in setting up a community in your own neighborhood if you and your neighbors agree that that is something that you want to do. And ultimately, if we have several Firewise communities around West Point, then West Point Firewise is just a concept for a way to organize and coordinate and perhaps jointly put on events like this in the future. So if you're interested in another new Firewise community, we have information in the back, or you could talk to me or the other team members. What does the Firewise community program do? Well, basically 3 things. We try to help residents primarily with events like this by providing information that is useful to you to how to proceed to make your property safer. And we encourage owner action towards that goal. We also encourage residents to interact with their neighbors and do things on a block scale, street scale, neighborhood scale, because if you help your neighbor make his property safer, you are safer too as a result. That's just how fire behaves. So the more improvement that we can make on our own properties and on nearby properties, the better off we will all be. And finally, we work with agencies like the RCD, we've worked with OES, we've worked with the Fire Safe Council to explore possibilities of making, of doing projects that will have a bigger impact around the entire community. And the incentive for us, as I've mentioned, is that there is an insurance premium discount that is mandated by the state. And for me, that 4% retroactive, it was about $260. So I can buy some better screens for my foundation vents now. This is what the certificate looks like, and in future we will want to offer this to you online. There's a county group now called Firewise Calaveras. It's organized by the RCD, but there are representatives from communities around the county, and we are contracting now to get a website up where certificates like this will be available. Hopefully it'll be in the not too distant future, but I think we're being quoted a price of about $16,000 to get that website up that will function for all the communities in the county. So it's going to take a little bit before we get that rolling, but that's the goal, to let you download important information. For the information we need to collect in October, we're going to use this form on the left, and there are copies of it here on the table. You don't need them right now, but you might want to take one anyway. And the way it works, the top part of the form just explains why we're gathering data and what the program is all about. The middle part is completely anonymous. Nobody's going to be looking over your shoulder, all right? You will not put your name on this form, but we really want the answer to 3 questions. How many hours did you invest in improving your property in a way that would make it more fire safe? How many dollars did you spend on things like rakes or hoses or a new roof or a new deck or vent screens or whatever? And then finally, what's the quantity of vegetation that you took off of your land and either burned or chipped and hauled away or used as firewood? Those 3 questions we need to report back to the mothership every year to remain in good standing. And then finally, to make it more palatable, we're going to try to have this done at an October party. We're going to try to have some kind of a prize drawing. And on the bottom of this form, you do write your name and your contact info, and you'll put it into a box. And we're going to have a drawing for some prize. We don't know what yet, but we want to make this a pleasant experience for everybody to go through. And during the year, if you need to keep track of your time and dollars spent, we have a form back there that you can use. Now, we will accept just a reasonable best estimate of what you've done in the past 12 months. But for people that want to track this kind of thing, we do have this form that you can use. To start the Firewise community, the first one here, West Point West, we had to fill out 2 forms. There are several pages each. On the left is a Community Wildfire Risk Assessment Survey, and that took a while to complete. And on the right is a 3-year action plan, and we actually had to do it and then redo it before we got approved by Firewise Central. And I'll tell you, I'll be referring to these documents a little bit later on because this event today is organized around the results of these 2 documents. If you are thinking of starting a Firewise community, we will give you copies of our documents so you can see how we walked through the process. But for anybody who's just curious, all of our Firewise community paperwork is on the back table, including our financial statement. So you're welcome to see what we've been up to. But if you're wondering what's in our action plan, it's right here on the back table. We also had to get our first application in. We had to go backwards and estimate for 2025 how much vegetation was removed or burned and gotten rid of, and what kind of investments were made here. One of my neighbors put a new roof on his house, so that investment basically covered what would be expected from the entire community. Firewise startups. It's not rocket science, it's not trivial, it's somewhere in between. There's some steps you have to go through and you have to think about it. But we did it, and if we could do it, you could do it. So if you're interested in the Firewise community, you should feel encouraged. We have 10 copies of this little pamphlet on the back table, and if there are 10 people here that are seriously thinking about maybe starting a Firewise community, please help yourself to one of those pamphlets. Speaking of the paperwork that's back there, we spent a certain amount of money on printing and copying this season for this event. And we do have a little bit of money in the hopper that we raised. We did fundraising and donations over the past 6 months. Right now we probably have around $150. We want to keep a little cushion in there to pay for the costs of events like this, but we do have one expense that's coming up in the very near future, and let me explain what that is. The National Firewise program gave us 2 of these metal road signs that we can put up to define our community, raise public awareness, and create more engagement within the community and beyond for the Firewise program and for the importance of taking steps to improve area wildfire safety. And I've yet to talk to Caltrans to see if they can maybe do us a favor about installing these. But if not, we're going to need to buy a little bit of lumber and a little bit of hardware and find some private land with permission where we can put these signs up to let the world know that we are a Firewise community. And one of the benefits of Firewise is if you're known to be a Firewise community, it actually improves the value of your property without raising your taxes. So we're proud to have these signs. We'd like to get them mounted. I don't know what the cost might be yet, but a little bit of money that we're raising from the raffle or from your donations or from the t-shirt sales. I think we have 8 t-shirts left, and right now any t-shirt sale is pure profit. It goes into, except for the sales tax, it goes into the Firewise Fund for West Point, and it will help us with projects like this. And raffles. Speaking of raffles, oh, well, there's the t-shirt, the fabulous Calaveras Firefighting Frog t-shirt, limited edition. There are a few left on the table there. The Firewise sign we talked about. The raffle. You've probably all been contacted about raffle tickets. And what the heck could we possibly be raffling off this year? Well, hopefully you're familiar now with a 275-gallon IBC cube tote, a plastic container and a steel cage. And the interesting thing about these, one of the interesting things, is that 2 of these IBC totes hold 550 gallons of water, and a typical fire engine holds 500 gallons of water. So you're a little bit ahead of the game if you have a couple of these on your property where they're accessible. Now I'm going to ask our fire chiefs to comment on something. These have a 6-inch top port, so you can get a 6-inch hose or fitting in through the top, in addition to the 2-inch valves on the bottom. Modern suction hoses are flexible enough that you can get them into those openings. So Chief, is it feasible for your engines, the way they're rigged now, to use these as a water source in the field?
It depends. If they're somewhere in your driveway, within about 10 feet of an area that an engine can park, we could utilize them, the top access in it. Most likely, we'll be using a small portable pump with suction hose and connecting to the valve on the bottom. Most of our engines have 2-inch fitting hardware to connect directly to ag tanks, tanks like these, and then use a portable pump to get the water out and into our engines.
Okay, that's good to know. Chief Downs, how about your crews?
Same kind of situation. One of our engines does have a portable pump that we could pull a draft on there, but it's kind of a hard setup to do in an emergency situation for 250 gallons of water. To be brutally honest.
Okay. Well, I live about 7/10 of a mile from the nearest hydrant, and it's a challenging road for fire engines to get up and down. So I'm going to keep this water there, and it's just there if it's useful to me or to anybody else. But these totes have additional uses. You can make a portable fire suppression rig like this. Up on top is the one that I built. You're looking at a few $100s worth of investment. And down below, other people are putting them on skids so that they can be popped onto a fire truck. So you actually have a way to have a portable water source and pump. Depending on how much land you have, you may want some portability. I'm happy to have my rig. And it's not a toy. This setup can throw a gallon of water per second about 80 feet. Plus I've put 100 feet of hose on it from the pump. So I've got about 39 acres. I can get into places if I need to. I use this for backup when I'm doing burns on my land. But it's nice to have around in case there's a dry lightning strike or a neighbor loses control of his burn pile. These are not stand your ground devices. They're not gonna let you stay in place during an evacuation. What these are a way to stop a small fire before it becomes a big fire. Or if you know you're about to be evacuated, they can put a hell of a lot of water all around your structural property and make a big fat wet line around your combustible property. If you're thinking, well, heck, it looks like plumbing, I don't know how to do that. What I've done is I've used these snap-on cam lock fittings. Most of the IBC totes come with a cam lock connector on the bottom, not all of them, but most. And I bought hose kits and hardware that all use these cam lock fittings. So you basically just snap the whole thing together, and when you need to store it, it just snaps apart. It's pretty convenient. I do want to mention that you don't want to drive around with a half-full tank because you'll get sloshing and wave action, and that can actually capsize or cause some kind of an accident. Anyway, I think these are pretty handy, and I hope that tote that we're raffling looks appealing to you. Ticket sellers, do you want to just wave your hands a little bit in case anybody hasn't had their chance? You can get these people to help you out with tickets. Now, you won't need a tote if you have one of these in your backyard, unless you need a portable solution. Or even if you have one of these, you might be looking more at a stationary pump. And I just want to say that the stationary rigs are very, very similar to the portable rigs that I just showed you. But if you buy one ready-made, you're going to be paying about 10 times what the hardware costs. So I encourage anybody who's a little bit handy to consider buying their own parts, pumps and hoses. And you can make a really nice pump defense system for your water sources for a few $100s. Okay, moving on back to Firewise news. Our West Point Firewise community is 5 months old. We're encouraging other neighborhoods to consider doing the same thing. We will help. The Resource Conservation District has now formed a countywide committee called Firewise Calaveras to try to support existing and upcoming communities. West Point has a representative there, it's me. The group is trying to determine support, trying to do a website for the entire county, and there may be some funds that they are able to raise that could help with some startup costs for Firewise communities, but we We haven't taken that decision yet. I want everybody to know that the big county event every year, this year it's going to be at the Ironstone Vineyard, just next to Murphy's. A beautiful place to go, and I think it's going to be a great event. Everybody who has anything to do with fire safety is going to be there, and there'll never be a better opportunity in the county for you to learn even more about fire safety than what you're going to learn today. So put that on your calendar. This is really the big deal. And just as a reminder, also in October, we want to try to have a local party for West Point Firewise with cake and data capture. I want to just pause here. This is the end of the intro to our event. Hopefully we're on schedule. And I'd be happy to take any questions you might have right now about Firewise after I get a sip of water. I don't see any hands. Everybody feel pretty well informed? Yes, sir.
Well, do you have somebody that comes around and looks at your property and gives you ideas of what to do?
We have that capability, but we haven't implemented it yet.
Okay.
I have some slides on that, but they're at the very end of the slide deck. CAL FIRE has a program for qualified entities to get CAL FIRE training on that. And I went to, in February, I went to the QE 2-day training. It was in Jamestown. And as a result, everyone who went through that training got credentialed as a defensible space assessor. So I have the credential to do that. And in our action plan, we wanted to introduce that in the first year on an experimental basis, and then maybe ramp it up in the second year. So I tell you what, if you can catch me on a break and you are interested in that, or better yet, there's a sign-up sheet very next to the Lions banner in the corner. It says, what are you interested in? If you're interested in getting a defensible space and home hardening assessment for free from a credentialed person, and I'm not the only one, you can put that down there, and then over the course of the year, we'll try to get with you and work on that. Now, you're going to be meeting this afternoon some other credentialed DSAs from the Resource Conservation District. They have 2 there, and then up here there's me. So, good question. Let's talk about that later, and please jot down your wishes on that sheet over there. Well, yes, sir, Greg.
Yeah, I have a question. From the insurance perspective, I'm putting a mesh in below my wooden deck that I have, and I received a notice from my insurance that I can get the discount you're talking about. It seems like they're on board with that. But what is do you know what the size of the mesh? Does anyone know?
1/8 inch mesh.
I'm sorry?
1/8 inch.
1/8, yeah.
Okay, for anybody that didn't hear that, 1/8. We'll go over this a little bit later in the program, but that's the magic number. 1/8 inch screen in an ember storm will stop about 99.8% of the embers. And that's the best you can do really just with screen. If you go with a narrower mesh, you won't get the kind of ventilation that you're looking for. As you'll see later in the home hardening section, there are some vents that have 1/8 inch mesh and then a honeycomb of fire retardant material, and that'll give you effectively 100% coverage for foundation and soffit vents and things. But for just under deck screening, you can get a 36 inch roll of 1/8 inch screen. Lowe's will special order it for you if you're looking for a source. Sir?
Are you aware if State Farm has, acknowledged the fire safe certification, Firewise?
The state requires that
State Farm, yeah.
the state of California requires every insurer to honor a discount for the Firewise community, but the state doesn't tell them what discount they can offer. That's left up to the insurance companies. So the California Fair Plan is at 4%. For the other private companies, you'll have to ask your agent to let you know what you can get from your insurance. Also, I'll mention a little bit later, insurance companies have slightly different requirements than what you're going to hear from CAL FIRE or in a Firewise presentation. They're very, very similar, but the companies have the right to tweak the requirements on the discounts that they're going to offer you. So just keep that in mind. If there's nothing further, I'll plow on. I'm going to just introduce a few things before I bring Chief Hewlett from CAL FIRE up to give a presentation on defensible space. So just in terms of concepts, defensible space around structural property is what allows for safe and effective property defense by responders. The concept is not that your home will defend itself if you spend enough money. Okay, you can make your home very, very safe, but defensible space means space that crews of firefighting responders can get in there and do their job to protect your property. And they need to do that safely and without any hindrance or encumbrance. So when you look at your property and you look at access, think about that very carefully. It also, on your property, it has the effect of reducing structure exposure to combustion heat sources, which include flame. We'll talk about the 3 zones in more detail when Chief Hewlett presents. Home hardening goes hand in hand with defensible space. That's for if there are sources of ignition that reach your house, you want your house to be able to resist that as much as possible. And some construction has a number of vulnerabilities, and other construction is much safer. And we'll be talking in the second workshop on how you can upgrade your structure either bit by bit or in terms of massive improvements. There's a range of things that you can do. Those 2 things go together. If you have a problem with vegetation on one side of your house, maybe a neighbor and their wooden fence or something, you may want to prioritize home hardening on that side of your structure. And on the other hand, if you have a part of the structure that's going to be hard for you to upgrade, you may want to go overboard in that part of the property to make your zones even more fuel-free than what they would have been otherwise. Anyway, they work together. They can more than double your home's chances of surviving a wildfire. And this is based on a study that was done on 5 big California wildfires. The study was released last year by UC Berkeley. And this effect increases along with the degree of community participation that is happening. So it's not just your property, but there's an effect that spreads if the entire community is improving their wildfire safety. And that probably makes intuitive sense, but here are the reasons. If fewer homes and fewer trees are burning in your neighborhood, that's a reduction of flame and of embers, and consequently there's less spread of the fire from property to property. If your structure is hardened and it's less resistant to burn, that's less fuel that can catch during a wildfire and be a source of embers that will spread the fire. And when you have those protections that we're talking about today, fire crews can do their job much faster and much more effectively. They can get done with your property and they can immediately move on to your neighbor's property and the rest of the neighborhood. So it really improves the efficiency of the crews, and that further suppresses ignitions, which further suppresses the amount of fire, flame and ember source that's spreading through the neighborhood. So it's a real win-win compounding situation. That's why the Firewise program is a community program. We really emphasize that. I won't bother you with the fine print of the Berkeley study. There is a sheet on the main table there that has resource links to all kinds of information, including this study, which is online. But there's 2 things I'd like to draw your attention to. First, they really emphasize community participation here, not just single parcel solutions. What they're seeing is the tremendous benefit of having the whole neighborhood get on board and come up to speed with wildfire protection. And the second thing I would like to point out to you is this number up here, 17%. We're going to focus today on Zone 0. Chief Hewlett is going to have some things to say about Zone 0 and the other zones. But to me, it's amazing that complying with the Zone 0 requirement, which is the first 5 feet away from a structure, can reduce the chances of that structure becoming involved in a fire by 17%. So it's really a big deal, and it's probably the first thing that you ought to pay attention to if you haven't already. And in our action plan, we're going to be on this theme again later today. We had to do an assessment to qualify for Firewise of 11 possible vulnerabilities in the community. 3 of those related to defensible space, they're in green, and 8 of them refer to possible issues with structures that make them more or less vulnerable to ignition and combustion. And we had 10 residents, many of them are here today. We did an informal survey looking around the neighborhood west of town, and we came up with our own estimates on a scale of 1 to 4 of what was the condition or the degree of compliance with all of these 11 possible vulnerabilities. And this is the ranking that we came up to. And people were pretty much in agreement. There wasn't a whole lot of disagreement about what we were seeing. So some things we thought, like a fire-resistant roof, we thought there was pretty good compliance. Some things like dealing with wooden parts of the structures we felt needed more urgent attention and were a more serious problem. And then our battalion chief Hewlett was good enough to engage some crews from the Tuolumne Calaveras unit of CAL FIRE, and they came through the neighborhood and they did a more professional assessment and then provided us with that data. Now, I don't mean to blow your mind with this slide, but on the left is the neighborhood resident survey, and on the right is the CAL FIRE more professional assessment of these 11 issues. And there was general agreement, but if you look at the down arrows, those are cases where CAL FIRE was a little less optimistic in their observations than what we were. So using this data, our action plan, we actually wanted to do everything everywhere all at once, and our plan was rejected. So they said we had to do it bit by bit. So we've picked out just a few items off of this list of 11 that we're going to discuss with you today. And here they are. The lower 2 are considered to be very urgent. They have the worst rating scores that were possible in the survey, according to the CAL FIRE assessment. So we really want to pay attention to Zone 0 and also structural wall and deck skirting. Then we also wanted to add 2 things that would be easier for people to handle if they're just getting started with home improvements and things. We want screened vents, especially soffit vents, but really all the vents that you have in your house. And we want screened or cleaned gutters. And since we're talking about gutters anyway, we decided to loop in a reminder that metal gutters are much, much safer than vinyl gutters. We strongly encourage you to replace any vinyl gutters with metal. So these are the things we're going to hit on in the workshops today. And I mentioned earlier, the insurance companies can have their own details about how you comply with their requirements for home hardening discounts and things. So don't go in there waving, a CAL FIRE document or something. You got to listen to your insurance company. The requirements are going to be very similar, but the insurance companies can tweak them. So pay attention to that. It's going to be a challenge for a lot of people to upgrade their homes and their properties to come into compliance with full defensible space regulations and home hardening recommendations. We realize that. There are various constraints, including time. A lot of us aren't youngsters anymore, so we don't get quite as much done in a day. And things can be very expensive. So today we're going to try to start with things that are not as expensive. And meanwhile, if you can start setting aside monies for the more urgent, important things, the bigger projects around the house, we would encourage you to try to budget for that too. In the fullness of time. but we're going to suggest ways to get started that hopefully won't be too challenging for people. Just to warm up the crowd for Chief Hewlett, let's think for a minute. You can do this in your head or you can shout it out if you're that kind of person. What are the three necessary components for combustion?
Oxygen.
Fuel. Heat. Oxygen, fuel, heat. That's very good. Many of us got that in science class. What are the three types of heat transfer in which structure ignition can occur? Radiation. Conduction, convection. Very good. Sir, I'll ask you about your background later. Okay, radiation is that glow. If something is burning a few feet away from you, you feel that heat, and that can cause ignition. Last one. Which are three ways that wildfire can reach a structure?
Wind, embers.
Embers, which would be involved with wind. Did someone say flame very quietly? Okay, flame. I think I heard flame. What was the third one?
Treetop to treetop.
Yep. So you might not think too much about like falling trees and limbs, but if they're on fire and they head for your house, that's a big problem. So, look at the vegetation around your house, especially the big stuff, and think about how vulnerable it might be. So those are some things to think about as Chief Hewlett comes up to talk to us about defensible space. Right. So this is Battalion 3 Chief Stephen Hewlett here, based here in West Point. He's in the Tuolumne, Calaveras CAL FIRE unit, and we thank him for being here to share some information about defensible space with us today. Chief.
Good. Thank you. Morning, everyone. Everybody hear me fine? All right, so I don't need to use that. As he had mentioned, Battalion Chief with CAL FIRE here at the Tuolumne Calaveras unit. My office is here in West Point. The battalion I oversee is Battalion 3, pretty much from the community of Sheep Ranch to everything this side of Blue Mountain, all the way out to the North Fork of the McCalmy River, down to pretty much the passing lanes if you're coming up 26 past the Robinson Ranch. So pretty big area, several communities that I'm involved with, several cooperating agencies in there. It's good to get out, get with the community and try to help out and see that these Firewise communities are coming into play. So we're gonna cover the first part here. I got two different presentations today. First one, obviously mentioned, we're gonna be going over defensible space. The three zones, some of the changes in there, what we're looking for, not only for you to prepare your homes to defend them, but what we're looking to educate everybody on in there so we don't have to become an enforcement entity out there. The second part I'll be speaking to today is your home hardening. Our big motto we go with right now is wildfire is coming, are you ready? Is trying to get people in that mindset of preparing for wildfires as we're seeing increased frequency in wildfires as well as size and scale with them. This is some imagery in there that we try to get out, an understanding of what the environment used to look like. Back in 1909, the large open forest stands, meadows of wildflowers, seasonal grass growth, what we call mountain misery, bear clover. That was really minimal you'd see in areas in there. That's become a very invasive ground cover in there. A lot of the comments, history books you read in there, was being able to ride through a forest stand on a horse at a full gallop and not have to duck. And if anybody's been out anywhere around just this side of town or any forested area, you're not going to be able to do that. As we can see, once we really got into very aggressive fire suppression across the country, our timber stands became overstocked, 1948 versus 1989, very similar to what you would see today. And what people think now, the 1989 version of that's what a forest should look like versus a more open stand. This is what's leading to larger campaign fires, faster spread, greater intensity, more embers, and we're now putting homes in this environment, and people have become accustomed to this as what a forest should look like, a healthy forest, and the forest that they want to live in. So CAL FIRE puts together this puzzle in here, Firewise communities, fire safe councils, county influence, federal influences, our fuel reduction projects that we're doing in there. This all comes together to try and restore healthy forests, healthy vegetation areas in there, provide protection, provide awareness. Every bit of it's a component in there. Right now we've got the Firewise community portion in, and the part that I'm speaking to is 4291 properties. So it's Public Resource Code, or PRC 4291. That's the law that the state puts forth CAL FIRE's jurisdiction to say we can require the clearance around your house, how we can enforce it, how we can educate it. So the defensible space, it's a front line defense against the wildfires. It increases your home's chance of survival. It increases our firefighter safety. Defensible space as required by law, Public Resource Code 4291. It's a multifaceted look at there. If somebody's been around long enough, they probably remember prior to the siege of 2003, CAL FIRE only required 30 foot of defensible space. After a lot of what we saw in the siege of 2003 in Southern California, we added the additional 70 feet for that 100-foot clearance. We made 2 different zones in there, and now after the last few years of what we're seeing, we've created a 3rd zone, what we call Zone 0. So as we can see here, a home that had proper defensible clearance around a large scale fire, reduced fuel around it, fire lost intensity, and probably self-extinguished as the larger timber fire progressed around it.
Today we have 2 separate structures. One has ignition-resistant construction that meets our California Chapter 7A, which we call the WUI Building Code standards, and then has a Zone 0, which is an area of 5 feet around your house where we remove all the combustible material. The second house was built with combustible exterior building components. It has mulches that are right up against the house. It also has plants that are within that 5-foot zone, all of which can catch fire and threaten a building that has combustible siding and other non-ignition resistant components.
Look how quickly that green and healthy vegetation is flaming, and you can see more threat to the structure as that vegetation ignites. And this one is lit. The sidewall is now clearly burning.
We talk every year about defensible space and all the steps homeowners can take, but sometimes that doesn't make it tangible. Being able to see just how clearly this new requirement makes a difference, and we're able to make the demonstration and get the point across. Sadly though, tens of thousands of homes in the last 5 years were destroyed by embers. Could we have made a difference then? It's hard to tell, but what we know is as we plan for the future, homes today can be built to the standards. Homes can be retrofitted. Homeowners can take the steps to make sure that this science is used in their backyard and hopefully able to protect their homes.
So here's an image we look at of the different zones in there. The video talked about Zone 0 that we've recently created. It's that 5-foot buffer all the way around the house, where most of the time we see our flower beds, wooden fences, decks, anything that's connected directly to the house, that ornamental vegetation in there. A lot of folks will put, as you saw there, wood chips, bark, something along there, so if you don't have gutters or whatever, or the runoff from the roof, we're not having raw dirt there, something splashing up against the house. That's where we're finding, even knowing we may have 100% compliance within 30 feet, that good reduction in that additional 70 feet, the flame front isn't necessarily what's impacting these homes. When we're seeing these new large-scale fires, major wind events, the ember wash. The embers are traveling in excess of a mile. Some of these larger campaign fires, we're seeing the ignited material that's going up in the column. For case in point, the Creek Fire in Fresno is in the community of Shaver Lake. Burning material from that fire was landing in the streets of Reno. So when we're seeing some of these large-scale fires timed with weather events, you can have textbook clearance to be the next photo we put on a pamphlet with that defensible space, but that 5 foot where even the ornamental vegetation, we're still putting bark down. We have leaf litter from roses or other plants that we wouldn't think be flammable. They're green, healthy. We've got irrigation systems there. That's where that firebrand is going to land. It's going to hit the house. It's going to fall into there, generate heat. And a lot of these areas too, this is now that flame front has gone by and the fire engines are going house to house to house in that process, trying to save as much as we can. That zone 0 is where we see low intensity fire that after the crews have bumped down several houses, something's started to awaken, fire started, and the house is at its most vulnerable. That's where we're looking to get more education about zone 0 and that in there. It is part of Public Resource Code 4291. It is within law that you have to be compliant with it. However, we're a realist in our thoughts with it, and more of the education is giving people the opportunity to work on this. Most of the homes around here are going to have flammable siding, vinyl siding on them, wood siding. You're going to have flower beds out there, and we understand that we need people time to adjust. We can't expect people to reside their homes and tear out flower beds and completely re-upheave 5 feet around their house and the other things that are going to come into home hardening. We're just at an education point with it. So this is something too, you'll probably see your insurance companies wanting to see you affect changes. As CAL FIRE, we'll be educating you and working with you as a homeowner on it about what you can do to improve that zone 0, but we won't be doing any sort of enforcement on that area until we start seeing more newer construction that we work with on it. Zone 1 is what we initially classified as that 30 foot. That was the defensible space that you would have going back into the late 1960s when we first started our big campaign on this. When we talk about this, everybody gets into the mindset of defensible spaces to protect your home from a wildfire. That's why we have 2 different zones on it. The purpose of zone 1 is not only to protect your home from a wildfire, it's to protect your neighbors and the state wildlands from your house. In the event there is a house fire, the main purpose and the reason we have such aggressive thinning and cleaning requirements within zone 1 is in the event of a fire that your house catches fire, it will prevent it and give us a better chance to prevent it from spreading to the wildland or your neighbor's property. So this is where we're going to be removing all of our dead plants, grass, weeds, everything. We're trying to get down to bare soil, raking all of the leaves, all of the needles, cleaning the roof off, making sure there's no dead limbs overhanging your roof. There's nothing within 10 feet of a chimney, and that chimney is going to have that proper 1/8 inch spark arresting screen on it. So that way sparks do come out of wood stoves, especially up in these mountain communities. Wood stoves are a great and primary source of heat. But now if we do have needle cast on our, in our gutters, on our roof, those sparks coming out of it create an opportunity to have a house fire, as well on windy, cold days, embers coming out of your flue pipe, potentially igniting vegetation around the area. We also look at when we reference moving the wood piles to zone 2, understanding this is a workload in there for people is keeping the wood away from the house, keeping it covered so that way firebrands can't get into it. It's protected. It doesn't have leaf litter and needles building up on it where it's susceptible to start generating a lot of heat and additional ember cast. But it's not necessarily convenient for use during the winter months. We work with a lot of folks, winter months, rainy season, when fire danger is at its lowest. If you're moving the wood up onto a deck or right up against the house for ease of bringing it inside, we understand that. We still would like to see it covered. But that summer months, those times when we start seeing fires happen, that's in your best interest to get it out, get it away from the house, get it covered. So this is removing those flammable plants, shrubs, looking when you're putting any sort of ornamental vegetation around your place. Is it fire resistant, drought resistant? Just because it looks good may not necessarily mean it's going to provide good fire resistance. Some of those really decorative ornamental plants burn as well as gasoline. We want to maintain space between our trees, shrubs. We previously mentioned in there how heat is spread. So we want that space so if something does catch, it's most of that heat's going up. So you don't want to have your tree in your yard and then a whole bunch of vegetation underneath it. That's going to allow that fire spread to go up. So we want to see the trees limbed up. We want spacing. We don't want the limbs coming together. That also makes them vulnerable to beetle attacks. In drought years, that close canopy, the needles and limbs going all the way to the ground, they don't fly very well, but they can crawl and progress through. And real tight canopy, as you saw in that overstocked forest, that allows them to move through the vegetation and create additional problems. Your outbuildings, so sheds, detached garages, non-livable spaces, propane tanks, those need the same clearance constraints that we would see within that zone 1 out to 10 feet. So we want to see the needles removed, the roofs cleaned off, the raked down to soil in there. We are understanding in certain areas, properties that are on steep slopes, and you may have erosion issues. We see a lot of areas, people do a really good job raking everything out. Every needle is cleared off their property, and it's just the red clay soil around here. Then the first rain comes, and then mud's just going down their driveway. If light amounts of material on there, that just little layer of needle cast in there, a lot of times we'll work with folks and we'll see that, yeah, you need this to keep that erosion control in there. You need that little bit of grass that's weed eated down there, even though it may be dead, kept down at a fine level. That's going to keep that soil from washing away. So the Zone 2 section in here, as I mentioned, this came out after the siege of 03 when we saw horrendous structure losses in and around Arrowhead and some of the Big Bear Lake communities, some of the other complexes that we'd seen during those. The fire was able to get within that 30 feet but still had enough intensity to impact the structures, so we needed something to cause it to go from a sustained crown fire or a high energy fire and lose its energy and slow down and give the crews a chance to defend the homes. So this is where we want to see the grass. So this is your bear clover, forbs, any sort of natural occurring vegetation, seasonal grasses around here. We want that taken down to at least 4 inches or lower in height. Your fallen limbs, needles, twig, cones, things like that. Picking that stuff up, stumps or anything like that you might cut down that are under 3 inches, taking those out. We want to see the spacing in the trees. We don't want canopies touching. We don't want vegetation that might be flammable underneath your trees that you've limbed up in there. We want to have that good spacing. It should look like a park. We want it nice and open. So as I mentioned, living on a slope, so we talk about fire, its heat wants to go up, that convective heat energy. So we start putting things on a hillside in there, we need to increase that spacing to overcome that radiant and convective heat factor. So if you have a property that's on a hillside, you need even further spacing in your vegetation. When you're doing this work, we recommend doing it before 10 a.m. So that's your weed eating, your mowing, chainsaw use out there. After 10 a.m., that's when we see a lot of our temperatures are getting high. So one, only it's an effect on your body, but our humidities are dropping, the fuels are becoming receptive. So we start seeing this is when we get our fires. Folks that are trying to do the right thing, but they're out at 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon and their weed eater or their mower ends up starting a fire because they're in the heat of the day. When we look at this too, as Rick mentioned, it seems like a lot. 100 feet of space, if you look at your house and you cleared 100 feet every side of it and your house is in there, you're clearing over an acre of ground. And to think one person clearing an acre to look like a park is a lot. I try to tell people is do a little bit a day. If you go out and do a 15 by 15 foot spot, you'll have it done in under a year. And it's to put people in a mindset of, I can go out and clean 10 foot by 10 foot in a day. That gives me enough time on my job, playing with the kids, taking care of things around the house, being with friends. I'm not having to just be overwhelmed at all of this stuff that's in there. I'm just doing a little bit a day. And if I do a little bit every day, it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. Eventually, I'm going to have to go back to that same 10 foot by 10 foot or 15 by 15 spot and do it again. When are we seeing a lot of our communities, for all intent and purpose, wiped off the map? We see the Paradise fires, some of these major campaign fires. It's in the dry dead of winter, it's in the fall. For anybody that was in the community when the Point Fire started right next door to the Cal Fire Station and Cross 26, it was a wind event, it was in fall. We start seeing, the main Southern California campaign sieges, Santa Ana wind events, the big fires up north. A lot of people this time of the year, we're coming into spring, the grass is green, it's growing, we got the energy, I'm gonna do the spring cleaning, and I go out and I tackle my defensive space cleaning, and I'm tired. I've just worked myself, I've got it all knocked out, I've burned all of it, or I've hauled it all away, and now the winds of summer come, fall comes, the leaves start to drop, I'll deal with it in the spring, but this is when we let our guard down. We cleaned it in the spring. Well, our fuels are still really wet in the spring. The grass may be dry, the leaves that may be on the ground are starting to dry out, but those main drivers, the brush, the timber that really make these large fires, they're still pulling moisture up out of the ground from the winter. They're not as susceptible to create large, devastating fires. Now we get into the fall, they're dry, they're ready, and we've taken that break. So that's where the concept of little bit each day, cleaning in there, keeping up on the roof, keeping up on the gutters, that little bit in there going on throughout the year, not being overwhelmed, will help keep you more prepared for these type of things. And when we start getting into those times, we want to be really prepared towards that latter part of summer. We see summer coming, we start early, but then we get, through it. And when we think it's time to catch our breath, that's when we start seeing these large fires. So home hardening, before I get into this, I'll hand it back off to Rick and he can go into his next sections and we'll pick up onto this stuff in here and what we're doing to actually protect our home in that zone 0. Is there any questions before I step off?
The property line boundary there, how's that handled regulatorily speaking? I mean, if you really need to clear onto your neighbor's property, is there any support for that in the regulation?
Unfortunately for us, depending on if there's homes within that and it's a developed parcel and they're not cleaning their property and you're cleaning yours, it's that combination in there. If your home's 50 feet from the property line, you're obviously not going to get your 100 feet, but if their home's within 100 feet of that property line and they're not cleaning it, that's where our enforcement side comes in. We'll issue warnings, try to educate. If warnings go unheeded in there, we do have the means to issue citations to enforce that. If it is a large open space, we recommend you reaching out to them and seeing, can you have permission to get your defensible space onto their property in there. Mostly it comes down to, if it is a large open space, there's not a means for us to enforce defensible space from their residence up to that property line, and it's just where your place is in relation to the line, is that civil conversation with them. I would like to have my defensible space. Can I come onto your property and do this cleaning work and here to reduce the vegetation for my protection? And if they say no, you don't have the right to trespass, but it does open them to civil liability by having them informed of hazards that could potentially affect your home.
And one follow-up question, is there any restriction on wood fencing? Is that frowned upon nowadays, or?
We'd prefer to see non-flammable fencing, but mostly in the aspect of that zone 0 is any wood fence that might come up and attach directly to a structure, you might have a side gate on your house, is that 5 feet, that non-flammable portion in there, so it's not acting like a fuse if it catches fire somewhere and then burns right up to your house. Wood fences throughout the rest of your property or dividing are really of not much consequence unless they're attached to the structure.
Thank you.
So I know I'm in zone 031. Does that have any correlation with what you're explaining in the zones?
No, so that's, you're talking your evac zone. So that's how we denote if we need to determine and work with the sheriff's office on areas that need to get evacuated. That's how the county's broken up into different zones. We just went with a zone concept in there so people could understand zone 1 being what was 0 to 30 feet. Now it's 5 feet from your home to 30 feet out. Zone 2 being that. So there's, the zone just being the only correlation and the naming convention of it.
If you have BLM property next to you and you want to do, you need to go onto that property to clear some of that 100 feet, how do you go about that? Who do you?
Don't ask for permission.
Don't
do it, just do it.
I mean,
You can reach out locating, so the BLM for this area, their office is out of Folsom. You can reach out to them to speak with, ask to speak with one of the local enforcement rangers or their fuels folks. And the Forest Service and BLM, if you reach out to them and have a conversation and express your concerns, they do have what they call their good neighbor authority. And if there's large, like a whole street of homes that back up against it, they will work with potential grant funding for a street or a community to treat up against there or under their good neighbor. I just want to be able to have my defensible space. Can I do, and list out exactly what you need to do. I need to haul material. I'm not going to burn on your ground, but I want to weed eat. I want to trim the bare clover and pick up the limbs and the pine cones in there. And if you have that conversation with them and ask to speak with one of the rangers or patrol folks and let them know what you're going to do, a lot of times they'll work with you. It's when you go in unannounced and you start doing things and making changes that they can get upset about that.
they've got a lot of little trees this big, walls. That's good.
Yeah.
Who's responsible for clearing the Higdon Spink cutoff where you see it's just completely growing like this, almost to be a tunnel and the trees hanging like this?
So if it's you're leaving a private or a county maintained road or highway and anything private, so a community owner controlled roadway, that HOA or community is required under Public Resources Code to also maintain access and egress that has specs for fire engine routes. If it's your private driveway, that same Public Resource Code enforces it, and that falls on the owner. So I believe Higdon's a county road. Yeah, so if there's issues in there with that, that's working with the county road department for access concerns or things you see where they're starting to come in.
Disaster.
You might want to contact them because they just came through our road.
Hey, Darcy, I mentioned that, and Autumn and I have taken a look at that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Autumn, but it's a county responsibility, but additional funds would have to be found possibly through a grant application. Did I get that right?
If it's in the easement, it is county responsibility.
Speak up, please.
If it's in the easement of the county road, it is our responsibility. The expediting of the work could be helped by grant funding and specific funding, but I will bring it up with our public works director.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Chief, when it comes to firewood piles, firewood storage, I know that there's some rules around like the difference between a pile, like parked pile, versus a shed. Does it really make that much of a difference if you're setting up to defend a property Is it better to have it like in a cob barn style shed, or is it better to have, you know, for you guys to have it like off to the side in a pile or dry from season to season?
If it's in a covered shed or something that has doors or a drop curtain in front of it, if it's a fire rated like heavy canvas tarp that would cover it, and it's got ember screens around it, so understanding it needs air movement to stay cured. If it's got those measures, that's what we like to see. Is it's protectable, you can clear around that, versus your wood piles that just might be out there. They need to be covered, and anybody that lives around here knows the second you pile it or put it in rows out and not necessarily maybe in sort of a shed, the critters that come into it, that build the nests and everything in there, we start to see those really become susceptible to fire brands, and then the amount of heat generating out of a cord plus pile of wood out there really takes a lot of attention from the crews to deal with.
How far back from the structure would you like to see?
If it's in piles, we want to see it in that zone too. So we want to see it more than 30 feet from the structure.
I wonder if you want to address controlled burns on the property. You know, for something, for instance, I have a lot of spurge coming out, which is spreading like wildfire. Sorry about that. And other just combustibles that have built up over the years. Is that something that the fire department can help with, or is that something we're on our own, or is it just completely?
There is means if you are looking to what we consider broadcast burning, which is not having it in a pile, you're actually lighting the fire, you've got lines to control it and allowing it to burn. It is a good stewardship process of the land. It does put a lot of nutrients back into the soil. There are certain circumstances where we can provide assistance, or your local agencies can come and assist, or have an engine just there available should you lose control of it. But the nuances with that are a lot more for a one-on-one conversation to come talk to either Chief Downs or myself at our stations and work individually with the homeowners on that. And then last one.
My property backs, the back of our property backs up to the reservation, and our garage is like 10 feet to our fence, and then it's just forest. Is there anything we can do?
Similar situation, as mentioned up here, would be working with the person that might own that property and asking for the permission to get on there and do your clearance.
It's a land trust, and there's, I don't know how many people live on the property.
If there is structures on it, if there's something within your,
In back of me, it's forest. The structures are further down the road.
then unfortunately, the way the law is written, that doesn't give us the ability, other than they can civilly be liable if you've had a conversation with them about your concerns and identified hazards, and they do nothing to mitigate it.
Real quick, Chief, on that, I've worked with some tribal stuff in the past. I would go in and talk to some of the elders on the reservation. There may be some funding mechanisms to do maybe if there's value in that. But as far as youth voices on that, it is a reservation.
Thank you. Okay, real quickly, I'm just going to emphasize a few points because that's our commitment under the Firewise action plan. We're going to focus on Zone 0 for a few minutes. But Vicki, I wanted to mention, is Vicki still here? In our action plan in years 2 and 3, we're going to see if we can bring in experts from UC Extension to give us more information about how to safely do broadcast burning. So just mark your calendar for a year or 2 from now. But we're going step by step. I do want to mention, since we just talked about defensible space, our colleagues from the Fire Safe Council did bring their applications. It looks like this. And again, if you know someone who could benefit from this program and who qualifies to get defensible space around their residential structure, please see these guys and pick up a form and go ahead and turn it in. Embers. I had kind of an awakening a couple of years ago. Actually, it really hit me when I saw the videos from the Malibu fire, which was what, 15, 16 months ago, just like clouds of embers just racing through the air. And it really brought home to me the role of embers in the rapid spread of fire. And then when I started doing some research, I'm a little new to this, I realized that this really is known to be a significant issue. This is from Fire Safe Marin, and the statistic, I've seen this statistic several places. The great majority of home ignitions are going to happen not from a wall of flame that crosses your defensible space, but from embers that blow in and they don't know nothing about those zones, okay? And when they blow in, they basically hit your house. That's why we emphasize zone 0 for protection, and that's why we emphasize home hardening. This is a facility in Southern Carolina where it's funded by the insurance industries, but it's a research lab where they build houses inside this giant building and then they burn them down to see what happens. And they have machines that can create ember storms like this. It's pretty amazing. You'll find videos online if you want to see this on action. And in fact, Bobby, are you where you can reach that white sheet of paper that has all the resource links on it? It should be right behind you there. Anyway, on that table where Bobby is, it looks a little different from that. It's a different sheet, but you'll see a sheet with all the links to all the resources that we could find. We'll put that online sometime, but we have a printed sheet and it'll have a resource link to this organization. Yes, that's it. It's got a QR code for local CAL FIRE. It's got links to see all the videos that this institute has done, and they have reports, big, solid reports on exactly what works and what doesn't work in home protection. Anyway, look where embers are accumulating. They hit the sidewall of the house, they stop, drop, and burn. And there's also like air currents a little bit around the house that channel a lot of those. You can see that there. And there's kind of a zone where all of this ember activity is happening at ground level. Does anybody know what this zone is called? Zero. I'm so glad you're with us today in the program. This is a big reason why Zone 0 is so important. It's an ember trap. So that's really going to be the critical point where things can go south in a lot of these cases. And there's a couple more critical points on structures with regards to how wind carries embers and where they end up. And one of them here is under the eaves. We'll talk about these 2 points a little bit more in the home hardening section. So I'm here just to hammer in a little bit more about Zone 0. Remember, becoming compliant in Zone 0 can increase your house's chance of survival by 17%. So it's really worth paying attention to. And if you're not doing anything tomorrow, you might take a look at your Zone 0, because it's really worth paying attention to. The most urgent thing, well, the regulation calls for removing all flammables and vegetation from within 5 feet of your home. And as I understand the law's interpretation, your deck is now considered part of your structure, so you want to clear 5 feet away from your deck as well. And somebody mentioned fencing. You want to have a gap of at least 5 feet, and it's easier to do 6 or 8 feet so that wooden fencing does not contact your home. You need that much of a gap to prevent flame spread from your fence to your structure. But most of us around Zone 0, we may have landscaping vegetation, and some of these plants are extremely flammable and create a real danger for your home. Junipers, rosemary, sometimes lavender if there's a lot of thatch. These plants are full of oils and resins that just flare up in a heartbeat, and they become very, very hot. You don't want any of that next to your house. And even in Zone 1, which is beyond 5 feet away, you want to be very careful about what you're doing with any shrubbery that could create really intense flame heat. Lawns are not compliant with Zone 0. because when grass is dry, it can burn. And if there's a little pileup of leaves next to your siding, it can set the whole thing off and get your house burning. You may not have realized this, but no lawns. What you want is non-combustible material or bare soil. And if there's anybody here from Los Angeles, painting your dead lawn green does not make it compliant with anything. So don't go for that. All right, we had our laugh. Zone 0, larger vegetation, trimming of branches to at least a 5-foot distance from structures. And your highest priority is any dead branches or dead trunks that are anywhere near your structure, because those are the ones that are going to be the first to go and burn the hottest. And as the chief mentioned, the clearance around chimneys should be 10 feet. And maybe you're wondering why. Why? Because if a chimney is not well maintained, there's a good chance that creosote inside the chimney flue can ignite and create a chimney fire, and they're pretty spectacular. You don't want a vegetation anywhere around that. And a chimney fire can get ugly fast, okay? So you need to know how often you should be cleaning your chimney flue. And unfortunately, I have to say, I have to sweep my chimney flue every 3 months, or I have a problem. So make sure you understand what the appropriate schedule is for maintaining a clean and creosote-free chimney. And if you haven't seen this before, it's an extinguisher for chimney fires. $25. It costs a lot less than your house. So I would recommend, if you're using wood heat, this is a good thing to have near your wood stove, just in case. Okay, we were going to ask for some questions and comments here, but I think they were best directed to our fire chiefs. I'd like to just rush ahead through vegetation management before we take a break, because in our community, we are in the wildland-urban interface, the WUI, as the professionals call it, and we need to think beyond the 100-foot level. Vegetation management. You may have noticed from aerial photographs or from driving around, we are in a vegetation-rich environment in this community. West Point is embedded right in the middle of all that vegetation. So the defensible space guidelines are up top, but let's pay more attention now to vegetation management on larger parcels, especially in these rural areas. The concepts of Zone 2 can generally be applied as a starting point for managing vegetation beyond the 100-foot zone. Okay, you can't go wrong if you follow those guidelines, but there may be other considerations on these large land parcels. Basically, we have at least 3 goals here. We want to eliminate fuel ladders. And if you're not familiar with that term, ladder fuels, we'll be talking about it in a minute. You need to thin and space trees to make it look like the gold rush. Remember the photographs that the chief showed us a few minutes ago. That can be thinning, spacing, and debris removal. And finally, you need to consider access. If there's going to be a fire on your land and a crew needs to go and deal with it directly by bringing an engine in, are they going to be able to get to the parts of your land? Are they going to be able to get to your house with a fire engine? You have to consider access as well. Let's talk about access. If a crew can't get in there safely, they're not going to risk their lives to bring out machetes and chop their way into your property, okay? They probably have other urgent things to do as well. So you need to create good access to your structures and to any deeper parts of your land where you think they might want to have ground operations. So here's a quiz, and you can do this in your head or shout it out. What is the required horizontal clearance on a private road for a fire engine to come in and access it? I heard a lot of numbers, but I heard Joe say 10 feet. Joe, you win a mental prize for that. You want to try your luck again? What's the vertical clearance? Anybody? 12. Not quite. 16 feet. Good call. So if you're maintaining your forest roads, imagine I'm sorry, 14.
You lose points.
Now that I've disqualified myself because I don't look at my own slides, 14 feet is correct. So as you travel on your private roads on your land, or even just the driveway into your house, think about that rectangular shape that the engine is going to need to traverse. And one more thing. CAL FIRE, at the training that I went to, made it very important that they're very concerned that if they bring an engine in, there's an easy way to get the engine out. What they would be looking for, if at all possible, is space to just drive the engine forward, making a 180-degree turn and then exit without having to do any backing T-turns or any fancy maneuvering. So if you have the ability to create that for the crews and you haven't done it already, it would be a big help to them. They want to get in there, take care of your issues, and then shoot and scoot and get out into your neighbor's property or the next road over as quickly as they can. How many people played a version of this game when they were younger? Okay. Well, this is the original. It was developed in Victorian England. And this game, if you remember, there's little cards and things. The original version of this game was about virtue and morality. And the snakes represented evil and sin, but for the Victorians in that time, morality was a life and death issue. And if you don't believe me, look at Mr. Skeleton over here, who's fallen off his ladder and met a terrible fate. Now, look at the gentleman on the far left. It looks like an ember may have landed on his garment and scorched him. And if there are embers blowing around in this environment, they can start a ground fire if there are fuels on the ground. And so you've got a fire burning, and that fire is going to be looking for more fuel to expand to. And if there is a vertical progression of fuels, what we call ladder fuels or a fuel ladder, then before too long, the flames are in the canopy of the forest trees, and then you've got a genuine forest fire, which is one of the big, terrible events that is very difficult to control and puts so many people at risk. So one of the goals on land management is to eliminate those ladder fuels. Here's a real life example. If embers come in and start a ground fire, that's pretty easy to deal with. But if that fire finds some fuel, like this dead wood on the ground that's right next to that buckbrush, which is right next to some manzanita, and then there's a couple of mid-sized oaks in there. This was a winter photo, but when they're full of leaves, they can easily catch flame. And then suddenly it's up in the pine canopy and you have a forest fire. So one of the main objectives of land management for vegetation is to keep any spot fire that blows in on the ground where it can be dealt with and where it's only a small problem instead of a large problem. Anybody remember a snowstorm a few weeks ago? Well, I had about 20 of these on my land, and they are fuel ladders. The twigs and stuff can catch, and then that can go right up into the canopy. So I've had to pull all of them down. In case you're wondering what I've been doing for the last 2 months. This one actually broke after the snow melted. It was weakened, and then bang, down it came. Now you can see how all that mess on the ground could catch fire, and then it goes right on up. So I had to pull this and all the other ones out of there, and I'm in the process of disassembling them. And what do you do with that material? Well, right now it's legal to burn it if it's dry enough and if you can get a hot enough fire to burn the small stuff. The other technique that's been around for a long time is called lop and scatter. You use your lopping shears, you make two-foot pieces, whatever you can, and you throw them all around so that they don't stack up and make a big bonfire for anything. The big stuff, ultimately you're going to want to get that out of there too, but this coarse woody debris does not flash into a high flame fire, so that is a less of a concern in a wildfire situation. So making firewood out of the big stuff is a priority that you can extend out through the summer and the fall. Let's talk about those clearance rules. The chief gave us a very nice CAL FIRE image of what requirements are for vegetation clearances. I'll be showing that again in a minute just to make the point. But for example, how much clearance do you need to do? How many limbs do you need to remove on a tree to be in compliance with the 6-foot rule? Are you going to measure there at the tree trunk? Or are you going to measure out here where the little branches covered with needles are? Okay, this may not immediately be obvious the first time you think about it, but your 6-foot clearance rule is for the vegetation. It's the fuel to fuel separation that you're trying to comply with. So keep that in mind, and on a tree like this, and Douglas firs with droopy branches, cedars with droopy branches, you're either going to have to remove branches or you're going to have to go higher on the trunk than you might think. The 6-foot rule also applies, like here, where there's less than 3 to 4 inches.
Safety reasons.
Kelly, is it haunted? Okay, I blocked the laser. Ow! So when there's no more than 3 or 4 inches of fuel matter on the ground, you can use the 6-foot rule, okay? But the other rule that the chief showed us is a 3 times rule, or a 3x rule. We've got this bad boy here, this madrone, right next to the pine tree that hasn't been dealt with yet. And that could be a fuel ladder that would take things too close to these branches, so we don't have the right separation here yet. So what do you do? What do you do? I have a laser in my pocket. You can limb the madrone up 6 feet. That's a good start. You could remove the madrone, or you could shorten it, or you could check out the actual clearance that you have to the upper branches and see what makes sense to clear. But you have to look at all the elements of the puzzle. And those are the branches you may need to deal with. You've seen this before, but it's important, and it is such a useful guide. I think it's on paper somewhere, but I didn't have copies of it in the materials that I brought. This is online, though, if you want to check at readyforwildfire.gov. So the 3 times rule, the 6-foot rule, those are the 2 to remember. And also remember, for slope, you have to make adjustments. The steeper the slope, the greater the separations and clearance that you need. Okay, I'm staying away from that. So here's some ground and pile burning that I did recently, and you'll notice that there's 6 foot of clearance between the fuel on the ground and the oak leaves and branches above. And you'll also notice that the clearance is 3 times the height of the fuel material on the ground. So this complies with both of the guidelines. But remember, those are minimum guidelines. And to be honest with you, I had a water pump there and I was keeping the flame height down to a reasonable level. Anyway, I hope you can remember those rules, both for zones 1 and 2, and also for larger parcel vegetation management. On your land, you may have some of these species. Some of them are actually more chaparral or higher elevation, but we have plenty of manzanita, toyon, buckbrush, cedar, and there is yerba santa not too far from us here. Those are highly flammable shrubs in the environment, and if you've never seen them burn, you'll be in for an experience the first time you do it and you haven't made adequate precautions. So we don't want thickets of these things, and we very definitely don't want them under the forest canopy.
Are they protected?
There's one protected species of manzanita near Sonora. Okay. So 3 things that we're likely to have around West Point: thickets of cedars. If there's a mother tree that's seeding out underneath it, you'll get these cedar thickets. Believe it or not, I already did 1 thinning on this, and I have to go back and do more. But those will just go up like torches. You really don't need 50 cedars in a 100 square foot area. There are a lot of manzanita thickets, and some of the species that we have here grow back after they've been masticated or scraped, so it's a continual problem. But when you can, if you can completely eliminate them, isolate them away from everything else so you get some of that nice manzanita honey one of these days. That's the proper way to deal with buckbrush, manzanita, those type of things. Separate them out and don't let them get big enough where they threaten other vegetation.
Are all these problem pictures from your property?
Yeah, I'm proud to say I've had all these problems. And the chief was talking about the pace you can set and, you know, doing 15 square feet or something. I've been working on my land for 12 years, and there's still some issues. I've been doing this by hand. I'm not going to touch the screen. But this area over here I cleared a few months ago. It looked exactly like this. And I've been doing that by hand. It's a slow process. This would not be safe to burn in my estimation unless you had fire engines positioned all the way around it. But this year I plan to get a backhoe in there and scrape it all clean and put it into a pile, and maybe it'll be safe to burn when I'm done. We'll see, but at least we'll clear the ground of all this fuel. If you've never seen a toy on fire, it's kind of spectacular. It's kind of like a Roman candle. But this was a big old one. I was starting to remove all the green vegetation, and look what I found underneath. I found 50 years of thatch and a wood rat nest. And all of that is highly flammable. So some of these things are more of a hazard than you might think at first glance. But get to know these highly flammable brush species and think about how you're going to either get rid of them or separate them enough so that they're not a threat to the rest of the habitat. And we're going to take a break here. This is just one section of the application materials that we had to file. We had to document extensively what our 3-year action plan is for our Firewise community, and right now we're experiencing part of that plan. So the topics that we're going to emphasize in home hardening are what we promised the Firewise mothership that we would do before they approved us. And forget the fine print. It basically boils down to, we want to talk about skirting and clearance for the sidewall of your house. We want to talk about vent screens, especially soffit vents. And we want to talk about roof gutters. And we can't help ourselves. We're going to mention decks too, although that's part of next year's action plan. The chief talked about don't let your guard down during October. October can be one of the most dangerous months for fire because of dryness, because of leaf accumulations, and because of east wind events. So ember storms can be part of what you see in October. Let's first talk about vent screens. This is a pretty simple concept. There are 3 different kinds of vents that you usually find on houses. There are foundation and crawl space vents. There are soffit under eave vents, which Firewise is particularly concerned about, and I'll show you why in a moment. And then some of us have gable end vents if we have a 2-pitch roof. Some people have ridge vents, and I'm not that familiar with them, but hopefully ridge vents have 1/8-inch mesh screening as well to prevent ember intrusion. What is the largest safe mesh screen size? We went through this before. Anyone? 1/8 inch, yeah, and that'll do better than 99% ember stoppage, but occasionally a little teensy one will pop through. Okay, all 3 types of vents are available with these mesh screens already built into them. You can buy separate rolls of screening, so if you can't replace your vent because it's an odd size, you can add screening to cover your vent. All right, y'all, settle down. Why don't we shut those doors, guys? Okay, so here you see foundation vents. In the upper left is my house. I have an old style vent that has 1/4-inch mesh. I cannot find a new replacement vent screen in the same size, so I had to add a second layer of screening over my existing vents. Sometimes you can find a ready-made vent that you can fasten, or in the upper right corner, there's the vent screening material, 1/8" stainless screen. You can buy that. You can buy all of those things at Lowe's, but remember, they won't have every vent size. Down below is a special type of vent. This one is made by Vulcan. It has the 1/8" mesh screening on both ends, but in between there's a honeycomb of a fire suppressant material. So if an ember gets through the first screen, it lands in that honeycomb and it gets extinguished. Now, these are single-use vents. If that vent operates to stop a fire, you have to replace it afterwards, but they're cheaper than your house, so something to think about. In any case, most agencies recommend that if you have time before evacuation, go ahead and put metal tape or some kind of a non-combustible cover over your vents just to be doubly safe. This is what soffit vents look like. A lot of them are, in the modern construction, are these round ones. The ones in the middle there have that honeycomb fire suppressant material in them. Of course, they're a little more expensive. Some people have these rectangular soffit vent openings. This is what a gable end vent should look like, metal construction with an 1/8 inch mesh screen behind it. Also, something to remember, and I have this problem at my house, you don't want a ledge around any of these things that embers could land on and maybe find combustible material. So one way or another, with caulking or with remodeling, try to make sure you don't have ledges that trap embers. Roof gutters, that's our second target. Make sure that you have metal gutters, and screens are preferred. Vinyl gutters are incredibly flammable, and I've seen videos of this that are just shocking, but I'll show you a still photo. I think I have it right here. Okay, this is one of the ember storm experiments that was done in the facility in South Carolina, and watching the video of this, what was happening was the bark mulch at the base of the house in zone 0 started burning, and then in the video you can see just suddenly the roof gutters start to melt and then burst into flame from the heat of the fire that's on the ground. It is really shocking. So if you have vinyl gutters, I urge you in the strongest terms to consider replacing them with metal gutters as soon as you can.
And they make toxic gas when they burn.
Well, that's icing on the cake, isn't it? But they're not good for fire protection. Okay, even metal gutters. Let me introduce you to somebody who was very, very focused on evacuating and packing his car and getting his animals taken care of. But he forgot to clean his roof gutters. Now, remember in October, you're going to have a high fire risk and you're going to have leaves everywhere. And you may not think of looking up into your gutters, but there's going to be leaves up there unless you have screens covering the gutters. And this is a problem. I'm not going to touch the screen again. But underneath those non-combustible Class 1 shingles is some plywood underlayment. And if you don't have a metal drip edge covering that plywood edge, the gutter can set the plywood underlayment on fire, and it doesn't matter what kind of a roof surface you have at that point. You've got combustible plywood involved in structure ignition. So if you don't have screens, clean the gutters and think about adding screens. And Mae West here wants you to put something on, and she's talking about roof screens. So see if you can get that done. It's a relatively low expense compared to some of the other things that you may need to address. Third thing is hard skirting and separation of the vertical wall of your house. And what this means is from the ground level up, you want to have a minimum of 2 feet of exposed surface that is non-combustible. Now that may be the perimeter foundation, depending on how your house is built. But if you have combustible siding, wooden siding that comes down closer to grade, you're going to want to correct that hazard, because it's a hazard in much the same way that zone 0 is a hazard zone. It's just right in the danger zone for ember ignition. So this would be bad. because you've got combustible siding going down into a zone 0 that's not being maintained at all. Well, this is good. You've got a non-combustible ground perimeter around the house, but you've got a 2-foot masonry skirt below the wooden siding. So even though the wooden siding is combustible, you've got that 2 foot of separation, which makes you much, much safer, because that's the danger zone.
Looks great, doesn't it?
Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. For example, hardy board, various kinds of things. For a quick fix at my house, I'm putting up metal flashing, and painted over it won't look so bad. In the long term, there's some siding and some decking I need to replace. But for this year, I'm going to do a quick fix. Metal flashing and drip edges are going to work for me. Now, houses that are up on piers, they're just not a good design for the wildland-urban interface. If your house is surrounded by vegetation, if you're in a community that's surrounded by vegetation, having an open area like this under your house is a real risk. So what CAL FIRE and Firewise are recommending is that you enclose that space somehow so that embers and flame cannot get under your house. And there are a lot of non-combustible building materials that can be used depending on the actual situation. But here's an example for decks. Greg, was it Greg that was asking about this? This is, you can order 36-inch rolls of 1/8-inch mesh screening through Lowe's, and you get to screen 100 foot of your deck, whatever you call that. Anyway, below the edge of your deck, you can screen all the way around. That will keep leaves out, that will keep embers out, and as long as you clean it before you screen it, that is a very fire-safe solution for decks. It might also apply to some other parts of the structure where that would be your best choice. Okay, just a quick word on decks. Which 2 feet can make this property safer? That property is going to be a challenge. But those 2 feet right there, those 2 feet right there, if you can't replace an entire deck and you can't replace an entire sidewall with your current funding, is there anything that you can do temporarily to put non-combustible materials in that zone? For example, putting down like 4 strips of a combustion-resistant decking material adjacent to the house. Maybe putting in a drip edge along the bottom, a metal 90-degree angle so that there's no gap there for leaves to accumulate in. And then either replacing or covering the first 2 feet, or at least the first 6 inches of your sidewall with a non-combustible material like metal flashing or hardy board or something. Zone 0 extends from the deck. Don't forget that where vegetation is concerned. I'm going to pause here and ask Chief Hewlett if he would honor us with his presentation on defensible space from CAL FIRE.
All right, some of this stuff may be review on a lot of what Rick was just covering with some of the tips for home hardening. This is all stuff that's really started coming out of in correlation with Zone 0 and what we're doing inside, outside in there to protect our homes from direct flame front. But the biggest thing, what we're really seeing, as he talked about, is that ember wash, that bombardment of embers, and just like having an entire community with sparklers pointed at your house, and what this is going to do to give you a fighting chance. So addresses are a big one. Not only are they required under Public Resource Code 4291, the address has to be the numbers, letters, however you have it, 4 inches in height and need to be contrasting. So the brown wooden sign that's been routed out with 4-inch letters in there, if it's not of a contrast, it's not going to work. Or hidden, not visible from the street. Imagine your view of, you're not in your car, you're elevated, you're in a large boxy fire engine vehicle. what would you see? Imagine sitting on the roof of your car, your pickup while you're driving around. That's the view that we're gonna have. So out at the street, where somebody passing by, can they see it at night? Is it reflective? We wanna be able to see those. We don't want them painted over. Is the vegetation obscuring it? Do we have to go down a long driveway to see it on your house, or is it out at the end of a driveway? So some of these places that have 1/4 mile long driveways, your address on your house is not gonna do us good to drive in and out each driveway looking for it. Roofs, as I had mentioned, a lot of older communities had shake shingle roofs, wood roofs on them, that were really susceptible to fire starts from embers coming out of the chimney, firebrands, and direct fire contact from a fire front coming in, as well as just the material that gets in there. Needles get hung up in them. They're really hard to keep clean and maintain. Your comp roofs have fire resistance to them, but they are a asphalt shingle. It is a flammable material. Embers and stuff hitting them really won't cause it, but that needle buildup in the valleys, in your gutters along the leading edge, do allow that asphalt shingle to ignite, and then now it is a fuel fire. It is a petroleum product that's on fire. So stone roofs, metal roofs, things like we're seeing in there is that houses are going to are providing that protection. So even if the clumps of needles or leaves on them do catch fire from embers in there because you haven't been able to get them 100% clean, the last time you clean them, some winds come through, we've had material in there, they have that fighting chance.
Question? This may be also directed to Rick. How about the eyebrow? I have eyebrow vents on the roof. I think that's what they're called. They're short. Do you need to put screening, fire resistant screening on those vents?
And that's within the building code. I can't remember the year exactly on it, but anytime roofs are done, if they don't have ridge vents in there, sometimes they're just the cap of the roof will be elevated a little bit, or there'll actually be a metal plate that's installed in place of some of the shingles. Those have to have that vent mesh material in them. Sometimes it's a wire mesh in there that allows air to move through, but not critters or embers. The metal ones that are manufactured to drop in, those already have that 1/8" screening material inside of them. As I mentioned, your chimney, that 1/8" screen, this one's kind of hard. The 1/8" screen, it's a battle. You're burning a lot of pine wood, stuff around here that might have sap in it. They clog up really easy, and they require constant maintenance and cleaning on there, but that's what is going to help that flue fire or the occasional sparks that are coming out of there from coming out into the environment and starting your roof on fire or going out and getting the surrounding vegetation. Skylights, obviously if there is a fire and you have the time to evacuate, ensuring they're closed. They do have some sort of a screen on them, preferably a metal screen. Same thing with like window screens, sliding doors like that. Anytime you can get that wire metal screen on there, it's better should there be a window or a door left open in the event of a sudden evacuation or need. That's going to hold up versus the plastic that embers are going to go through. Gutter guards are always good. They make your life easier. You don't have to clean out as much in there, but they do come with their own set of problems in there that you just have to get used to. Versus you can see when gutters contain all that material. Biggest concern with these, that is a receptive bed, embers that land on the roof and roll down, embers that land in the gutters, prime amount of fuel in there. If they are vinyl gutters, they will ignite themselves and allow that material to go to the ground or light that leading edge. If you do have comp shingles on there, even metal roofs, you do have that little bit of wood interface in there and that heat to get underneath that metal and potentially start ignition. As we talked about the vents, so a lot of vents that you see in that first picture there are what you see at the end of houses, typically about the era of construction for most of the community here. Most people have put mesh or some form of wire in there. A lot of those when they were originally put in were just open slats, but anybody that's had critters get up in their attic has probably put screens or something in there. You definitely want to have that 1/8" mesh backing on it, not only to keep animals and things out, but that's huge entry point for embers to go in and really be caught under that eave and forced into your attic space and into the insulation. We want to make sure they're not rusted, there's not cracks around them, they're not catching needles in themselves. If you're on a windward side of the house, when you get the needle drops, a lot of times the pine needles like to find their way into those and get hung up and create an ignition source. Same thing underneath your eaves. A lot of times, modern construction, what we see under there, that covered soffit with those vents in there to allow air exchange in your attic space and out, are vinyl. We want to try and see that those are metal or some sort of screen in there so the embers aren't getting hung up into those. Any place that you see cracks, things like that, remember those embers are that 1/8" small things that can get in there. Things that, you know, birds' nests, anything like up in there that are going to be those receptors for firebrands. Windows during the summer months, open windows, things like that. The reminder of in the event of evacuation or an impending fire is closing the windows. If you have the plastic screens, taking those off because the radiant heat coming through the window or on the outside, if they're an outward screen, they will melt. They're going to create molten plastic. Molten plastic creates a source of ignition, and it could compromise or generate enough heat if you have plastic window frames to allow something to happen. You want to make sure your window tracks are clean of debris in there that might catch firebrands. Double pane window or better, modern windows do provide good protection for the radiant heat. Should there be that intense heat outside, that's going to provide that protection inside so you don't have heat transfer in there. And that's going to be affecting things like your curtains or couches, furniture, things right up against the windows. Siding, as we talked about, most homes around here are probably going to be wood sided, maybe metal sided, maybe vinyl. Some folks have probably started converting. Newer homes are going to have concrete siding, maybe metal siding in there. What we're looking at is your vinyl sidings, really easy, susceptible to firebrands burning through it. Most of the vinyl siding is going to have some sort of a foam backer behind it. And a lot of those older foam backings don't provide any sort of fire resistance. So now we've just put embers through that siding and into it. Wood siding comes with its own issues, combustibility. That's where that zone 0 is, that what are we allowing to ignite right up against the house if we have plastic siding, wood siding. Fences, wood fences, again, like you saw in the video, they're the cannon fuse. They may light somewhere else and just keep working their way up and provide that source of ignition at your house, up under the eaves. So having that space, having a metal panel perhaps in there, something to give that, should it catch fire, it's not going to go directly to the house. Making sure your siding, even if it is concrete siding, masonry in there, it's in good function. It doesn't have cracks, it doesn't have missing stones where you have that exposure to wood. Garages, making sure you have doors that are closed and functional. They go all the way to the ground. We see a lot of times is the garage doors that don't go all the way to the ground. They might be a little off kilter. They've got just that little bit of space. When firebrand fronts come in, it's some of the pictures you saw with like the elevated sprinkler heads throwing the sparks at it, kind of giving that sparkler effect. They'll hit and they'll swirl around. When you get those winds coming in, you'll get that main blast and then you'll watch them and it's almost like they're dancing in little mini tornadoes. You'll see them lay flat on the ground and a 1/2-inch gap under your garage door. They'll lay on the ground, they'll swirl around as they find wind influences on your house, and they'll go right under your deck, they'll go right under the garage door, they'll get in and they'll find those places and find their ignition sources. Water supplies, having garden hoses or means around your house help out. When we talk about the water sources, if my engine's back up, they're instinctively trained to look for a garden hose or anything within proximity to your driveway, where they're going to pull up and park. They're gonna look for that. One, it's a mean for them to start putting stuff out. It helps us. I can be stripping hoses off the engine, trying to drag those around, chasing all these firebrands as the crew's splitting up and dealing with maybe multiple ignitions around your house. These garden hoses provide a means for people to come in there. Myself, I'm in a pickup truck. I'm not in an engine. Chief Downs is in a pickup truck. While we're in these environments, I've saved countless homes with just my water can extinguisher and grabbing their garden hose off the back deck and having those things out there, having them there, having them hooked up. It tells us that there's water available and we can do something with it. The crews are going to try and grab these, utilize them, but they're also throwing them in the tank. We have top access. They open a hatch, we put the garden hose in the tank, and that saves us time. If we need to find those totes or water tanks in your property, your pools, hot tubs, we can do that, but the time it takes us to set them up while we're fighting fire with the engine, even your garden hose, if it puts 10 more gallons in our tank, it's something more we can do. So having those around, having them coiled up, if they're hooked up to it, if there's a key that has to be used to open some of the faucets, having those in there, that's all stuff that prepares us and prepares you for that fire. So these are some online resources. How to harden your home, update your home, how you can do it cost effectively, prioritizing your means out there, some sites to look at. The readyforwildfire.org, that's going to go over our Ready, Set, Go program on how to get ready for the fire, how to prepare when fire season's here, and what you need to do and have ready when you do go, how to be prepared for that in the event of evacuation. The Office of State Fire Marshal is going to have that information on what you need to do to home harden, what the codes are, what the laws are. So when you do, because home hardening is such a new thing, some contractors might not be aware of the new codes, and it gives you that opportunity if you're replacing windows, if you're having a new roof put on, you're having decks worked on, things like that. You can see what those codes are in there to make sure you're compliant with those, but also maybe getting ahead of that curve in there, being prepared for that fire. This is another big one in there. It comes into tying that defensible space and hardening your home is what do we do with all that vegetated material? What do we do with the needles and leaves we blow off the roof? What do we do with the grass we cut? How do we get rid of it? We can only transport so much. We can only take so much to the landfill. We can only take so much to cogeneration plants. One of the best and most viable options is burning, but it does come with its inherent risk. There is smoke, there is risk of escapes. We try to be really upfront with our education in there. In the Tuolumne Calaveras unit, there are multiple fires caused every year by burning. However, there is not a single recorded case in the Tuolumne Calaveras unit of a fire caused by somebody burning that followed the rules. So in this, if you have a 4-foot pile with 10 foot of dirt clearance around it, water, you stay in attendance, you burn on burn days, and you follow the rules of the permit, we have never had an escape from somebody following the rules. They come from people walking away from their burn piles, not having proper clearance, burning too large material, not having water on hand, not having their tools. It's some chain link is broken in following the rules that is equated to it. So it is a overall highly successful process getting rid of the material. It does put nutrients back into the soil by burning the material. It gets the carbon back into there, and it's the most cost effective. You're not renting dumpsters, you're not hauling it, you're not paying disposal fees. And where most people are used to the 4x4 piles, we do offer the opportunity if you do have larger land and you want to broadcast burn, you want to burn larger piles, this permit site will go through, there's videos and information on how to burn larger piles, how to communicate with us if you want to broadcast burn, how to take care of those larger chunks of land and reintroduce natural or what we call good fire back into your environment in there. And that's going to prepare yourself by getting that defensible space and that process, hardening that home. Any questions? All right, back to you.
I have a question for the audience, and you can help us here, Chief.
Can you burn on a legal burn day?
Say that again, yes.
Yeah, that's the answer I was looking for. It may be a legal burn day, but if the wind conditions change, it may not be safe to burn, and you have to use your own judgment about when that's true. What would be a rough guide, like 10 miles an hour? It starts to be tricky.
For us, when we're doing, those in the community probably are aware of the burns we do up Winton Road, trying to reduce the fuel up there. For me, if I have a face level wind over 5 miles an hour, even with our training and our resources on hand, control and mitigation efforts become challenging. So if it's over 5 miles an hour, hot, dry day, some days where it's what they equate to being the best opportunity to burn are those windy days, because it's clearing everything out in there, but it's not necessarily the prime time. And the information that goes over in these sites, the videos that you'll watch, talk about making those decisions, your thought process that needs to go into when you're going to burn, and understanding that in the end, it's your judgment. It may be a burn day, you may have the permit, you may have put your signature on it. Something does go wrong, you're still ultimately responsible. So it's your ability and comfort in what's going on to maintain control of that fire and end up with a good product.
Exactly. Thank you, Chief.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help me get back to my presentation?
If I have a non-combustible wall, do I still, in zone 0, do I still have to have 5 feet of clearance?
If you have a, say, non-combustible wall and a concrete walkway right up there, and you've got some planter beds or a wooden fence up to it, you still have to have that space. Because even though it might be a concrete, like hardy siding wall or a metal sided, it's still got wood behind it, and the heat can transfer through and cause ignition.
I have a concrete wall with a planter and then concrete, and I have some shrubs in the planter.
Still, by the letter of the law, it's still within a violation. However, the intent, you have everything in place there, and for us, when we look at it, is you're doing the right thing, and it's a lot easier for my folks to show up and pull a planter away than having to pull a planter away and then carry it out to your yard because you have a wooden deck, wood siding. So those things, if you know you're going to be evacuating, moving that item 5 feet away from the wall before you leave is going to be huge. For as long as the planters are, metal container, non-flammable container type things in there, you're showing that effort. That's what we want to see, is that we understand, and that zone 0 is a huge change into everybody's lives. We've gone, you need to have non-flammable vegetation up against your house, clear this out, all these things, and it's such a huge change. We're not really looking to enforce that and worry about somebody showing up to write you a ticket because you have your planter beds there. We might just, like we're educating now, hey, this is still potential risk. The soil that's in there may catch, the plant may burn. You may still have radiant heat exposure next to your house. You could have a source of ignition, but we're not going to be writing you a ticket over something small like that. So that's a judgment call on you, is understanding it still does pose a risk, but the rest of the boxes you have checked, that you're hardening your home with that.
Question. Trex decking. Good, bad, indifferent?
Will burn.
Will burn.
If you go to the fire marshal's website, you can see the rating for every Trex product and every AZEC product. And even within a certain manufacturer, you can see that their deck products they have class 1, class 2, or class 3, all from the same manufacturer. So do your research before you put your money down.
Yeah, it's a composite product, and depending on what type of gap you have between the boards, what material embers get in there, it may not be enough to generate ignition, but if there is material, it can ignite, and once it starts, it's burning, and it's got the self-sustaining heat. Conversely, you got wood or whatever under your deck, that starts burning, you start getting a lot of heat, flame front impact on it. It's a plastic product, it gets soft. Now, what's that doing for the fire resources trying to get around your house, walking on molten plastic out there that's all spongy? And
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, I'll hand it back off to you.
You can see in these controlled tests that there are areas that are hot spots for embers in an ember storm, and one of them is under the eaves. A lot of the embers will hit the wall and drop into zone 0, but a significant portion get convected up into the eave space, and they can swirl around and accumulate up there, and if they find a crack or a gap, they can lodge in that area. That's why you will see so much emphasis in home hardening and in your insurance requirements and things for combustion-resistant eaves. You know, we're talking about soffit vents, but ultimately regulators would like to see the eaves completely enclosed with non-combustible material. So that's a medium-sized big job, but it could be in your future. So just keep that in mind. And I'm going to show you one more critical spot the chief mentioned, but I'll show you some pictures. You can see where embers are accumulating here, but they also go here. And I'm going to use the term an inside corner. And I don't want to confuse anybody. These are not corners that are inside the house. These are corners that are outside the house, but there'll be probably a 90-degree angle where two outside walls come together and they make a little pocket on the outside of the house. And that can be a wind vortex. And things will accumulate in those inside corners. Here you can see embers get tornadoed, they get recirculated in those areas by the wind currents. And not surprisingly, leaves and pine needles and debris get sucked into the same corners and they do the same thing. So I have 3 of these at my house. 2 of them I've fixed. This is the one that needs some attention, and for now it's going to get a temporary fix with metal parts to eliminate that problem. But also, it requires constant attention to have those leaves raked out or blown out, and especially in October, you should be putting that on your calendar that you need to keep an eye on that. You're going to have leaves and embers accumulating in the same place. And so that is a critical area where all the home hardening that you can manage to accomplish is going to be very important. There is literature. Again, we have a sheet that has all of these links on it. One of these days we'll get them online for you. But we have a sheet with these kind of links. This is what the state fire marshal puts out to tell you what products are approved and what their fire ratings might be. For example, like Trex or AZEK decking. That's online and you can download it.
Where is that located, or which table that with all the links?
Bobby, do you see the 8x11 sheet with all the resource links information right there near you? Yeah, it's right there. Anita's holding it up.
Thank you.
Shall we pass those around? We're getting late in the game. Why don't we pass those around, folks? Maybe leave one on the table. Thank you. Okay, just a few more slides, and then we're going to have a lunch break. There are tarps, and then there are tarps. And you may want to cover a wood pile or lawn furniture or a compost heap that's too close to the house. You may think about throwing a tarp over it. There are tarps that are fire rated as being combustion resistant or flame resistant or non-combustible. And it's to your advantage to try to find products that either have the California State Fire Marshal's seal of approval on them, or else that they have an NFPA rating on them, or that they've met some other kind of test standard for non-combustion. And these were all from Amazon. There's 1 million tarps on Amazon, and there's maybe half a dozen that are rated for combustion resistance. So something like this may be helpful to you. It may be better than nothing at preventing an ignition from embers blowing in. If you're going to go with a tarp for fire protection, go with one that's rated for fire resistance. And this is an idea that I came across, and you got to understand, please, we are not endorsing any specific products at any time today. We're making you aware of some things. But there is a product that's available from this supplier, flame retardant string reinforced plastic sheeting white. If you look down here, This stuff has been rated as having passed all kinds of tests for fire resistance. The cost is less than $1 a square feet. I bought a 100-foot roll just to play with, and I haven't got around to testing it yet. But as a special thank you for anyone who made a donation today to any of our 3 organizations, I have samples here that you can experiment and decide for yourself whether this has any useful protection against ember ignition or ignition of materials covered by this. This is normally used in a building material context to provide an extra layer of fire resistance. Whether it has extra use for covering materials or covering decks, I don't know. I'm not recommending this. I'm saying that if you've been nice to us today, you can take one of these and experiment with it. And when we get back together again in 6 months or 12 months, you can tell us, was that useful to prevent embers from igniting like leaves and sawdust below or deck boards or anything? I'd be very interested in what your experiences may be. And if you think it's good stuff, you can order a 100-foot roll online. But again, it's not a recommendation. I don't know enough about it yet. We're not talking today about active home defense. We did that last year, but I want you to know that these tripod sprinklers that I recommended that you used to have to order online, Lowe's is now stocking them in these featured displays. And this is my go-to for real-time wildfire defense using water around the structure. And we had a chance to ask the chief, an expert, about home hardening, but if there are any remaining questions before lunch, I'll try to answer them, then I'll show you one more thing. Oh, these people want lunch. Sir?
Evacuation tags still available?
That is a question for Cole Waite. Now, we have 2 speakers that are going to give brief lunch hour presentations. The first is Cole Waite from the Office of Emergency Services at the county, and I think he or the fire chiefs can answer that question for you when I stop talking. We're also going to have a nice presentation from Kelly Gerkensmeyer of the CCWD, talking about the water system primarily in the West Point area. And as you can imagine, the water supply is very important to wildfire defense in our community. So the evacuation tags, are they available?
Yes, they are available. The sheriff's deputies are issued them, however. We are the ones that put out the evacuations with consideration with our partners in fire. In the event that that actually does occur, we will come and make contact with you. Up here, it's a lot different than, say, Valley Springs, where the houses are a lot closer. Hi, my name's Cole. I'm a sergeant with the sheriff's office. We just recently took over OES. As far as what Rick's question was about the evacuation tags, they are available. They are issued out to deputies. In the event that we do come out and talk to you guys about an evacuation warning or that you are under evacuation, we will put one up in the event that you do evacuate. Unfortunately, we do have some times where people don't want to evacuate. That's your right. We are there to warn you that, hey, you're under an evacuation notice. We would want you to evacuate, but in the event that you don't, that is on you. Nobody will be coming back out to reach out to you if that fire does come up. That is your decision to make as an adult. We would love to see everybody pack some things and leave, but that is a reality of what we do. As far as OES goes, when we took over the program, it was overseen by the county administrator's office. It was staffed by 2 individuals. One had left. When we took over the program, it was 100% vacancy. That was when the storms rolled through. We ended up redeploying some resources strategically throughout the county. Obviously, it was a snow event, so we needed access to snow vehicles. The sheriff is working with partners at PG&E on trying to get more snow-capable vehicles, and then we're also exploring grant opportunities as well. I'm not sure if everyone was able to come to the booth, but I do have magnets, and Everbridge was a system that we use. They've since been bought out by Genesis. It's the same exact system. So if you were already on Everbridge, it'll roll over to the Genesis. The magnets that I have, I asked a few of you, hey, what zone are you in? Everyone was like, oh, I know it, but it's written down somewhere. The magnets mainly, I have one up on at my house. Unfortunately, these new refrigerators that everybody has, they don't allow magnets to go right on the front, right? So it's on the side of it. So there's a spot on there that'll actually allow you to write in your zone. When we do those early warning alerts, it'll come to your phone, email, house line, text message. It will warn you that you're in that zone that is under evacuation, because that's how the system works. It's all based on locational data, either you manually putting in your address or off your cellular phone. If you do not have a smartphone, I have a flow chart over there where we can log into the website and actually sign you up if you're not already on it. There's also QR codes on there where you can use your smartphone and it'll automatically pull it up and you can fill out all your information. If we were to scan it right now, it shows what zone we're in right now, not at home. So once you get home, figure out what zone you're at, and then you can write it down on the magnet.
Thank you.
Would you guys care to learn a little bit about the water system while we're here? All right. Definitely a topic that I just love talking about. So Rick told me to self-introduce myself, and usually when people say that, it's because they're scared of my last name. Earlier he said it, so I know he can do it, but I think it's still intimidating. But anyways, my name is Kelly Gerkensmeyer. I'm about 5 days away from finishing my 25th year with the Calaveras County Water District. Done just about everything there is to do there, starting off with working in the wastewater side of things. Most of my career was on the water distribution system, so all the pipelines, the pump stations, the treatment facilities, fire hydrant maintenance, everything in between. In that career, I've worked through several wildfires in Calaveras County, and really had a firsthand experience of the role in the background of what the water system is doing in the background. Many times during these fire events, of course, hats off to all the firefighters and all the first responders, but at that same time, there is dedicated water professionals in the background day and night, keeping that system going, whether it's distribution guys like myself, electricians keeping the communications going between all the different facilities, mechanics keeping the generators fueled, keeping them repaired, and so I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to try to keep most of this specific to West Point, but as you'll see, for Calaveras County Water District, we really span all the major watersheds in Calaveras, the Stanislaus, the Calaveras watershed, the McCollum, and we even have quite a bit of groundwater down there in the eastern San Joaquin subbasin, which our Wallace system utilizes. So again, I'm going to try to keep it to West Point, but I can go in rabbit holes all over these watersheds and all over our different systems. Here's kind of an overview snapshot of CCWD's infrastructure. Like I said, we operate in a very geographically diverse landscape, and we have systems all over the place, from Big Trees in the Ebbets Pass to Forest Meadows, down to Copperopolis, Jenny Lind, Wallace, Southworth, several different sewer systems. We have 6 main water treatment plants, 13 wastewater treatment facilities, although I should switch that because now we have 12, and that was because of a project we just completed here in West Point where we did a consolidation project with West Point and Wilseyville. It was 100% grant funded, so I need to update this slide, and we actually now have 12 wastewater facilities. We also have 27 different water storage tanks throughout our service areas, 18 different water pump stations, 45 sewer lift stations, 9 dams, and we also own 2 hydroelectric facilities. Like I said, mainly going to talk about West Point, which relies on the nearby sources like Bear Creek and the middle fork of the McCollum River, which has really supported West Point for generations. And so there's the Bummerville Regulating Reservoir and Wilson Dam, which are the primarily, those are the 2 primary sources for the town of West Point. This diagram kind of shows how all those pieces connect. Again, we have that, like I said, the regulating reservoir, but we also have a connection point in a contract with CPUD to, during dry years, be able to pull water from the McCollum. It's the McCollum River Pump Station, and we can pump that to the treatment plant as well. The last few years, we've had pretty good years, and so the Bummerville regulating reservoir has been able to be fine, but it's during those prolonged years of drought where we need that secondary water source. This footage is our West Point water treatment plant from a perspective not everyone gets to see. This is where all that raw water becomes drinking water day in and day out. Which leads me to a project that we're working on right now, which is a hazard mitigation grant-funded project for the Bummerville Regulating Reservoir. It's our CIP project number 11129. This project focuses on improving long-term water supply reliability for the whole system of West Point. And so this is a diagram of the current reservoir, and it is 50 acre-feet right now. And the plan is to enlarge the dam to 150 acre-feet. Right now with the grant, it's in the environmental and just the planning phases. But what this will allow us to do by raising the dam is really increase the amount of storage in there by quite a bit. Going from 50 to 100 is an enormous benefit to the community, and hopefully, it will have less reliance on the McCollum River pump station, and just have a much larger reservoir there for the community. It's going to be all in all a really good thing. Really excited about this project. It's, like I said, it's right now in the middle of all the environmental process, which can take quite a bit of time, but we're working on it. And like I mentioned, the hazard mitigation plan, CCWD has been doing hazard mitigation plans essentially since 2006. So, the last 20 years. These plans are crucial for us. These plans are required by FEMA to be able to go for any of that grant funding. Any of the Cal OES and FEMA grant funding, if we don't have an up-to-date plan, we are not going to even qualify for that money. So that Bummerville project was based off of, between their master plan, identifying the need, and having, identified it in these plans and having it approved by FEMA allows us to go for that grant funding. This is the West Point water treatment plant. We just finished up this part of the project last year. This was to install a backup filter at that location. At the time, we only had one filter there. And a water treatment plant is a 24/7 operation. And so if there's any maintenance that had to be done, it was really challenging. You can't just turn it off. And so this was a great project where we installed a second filter, giving us that redundancy and allowing us to be able to take it offline and keep up on it.
Where are these two tanks and?
So this is up at the treatment plant. What is that road?
Just up Winton.
Yeah, Winton. So those are the clear wells. And so I know they look just like a normal water tank, and essentially they are, but what happens when we treat the water, then there's chlorine added, and the chlorine has to react with the water for a certain amount of time. It's called contact time. So even though they look like a normal water tank, I don't consider it a storage tank, which it is. However, that's part of the treatment process still. So once the chlorine reacts with the water for an appropriate amount of time, then it can get pumped out and move throughout the system. So again, this project was just a backup treatment unit. It included all new piping, pumps, chemical systems, electrical work, controls, and some minor building expansion. I have a little video here, and it's going to be our operations manager kind of talking through the whole project.
Smitty Lane, by the way.
Thank you.
We are in West Point at our water treatment plant. This is our brand new filter that we just installed this last year. Basically, we have this filter for redundancy. The one thing for West Point was for quite a while we only had one filter up here. And as you can see, one filter, if something goes wrong with it, puts us in kind of a bind. So the project was to add a second redundant filter that we can now use. And for any maintenance purposes, for either filter, we can still keep water flowing to the town of West Point.
So yeah, it's really actually a huge improvement to the water system. It really does make an enormous difference. So we're really proud of that project. Again, just finished up about a year ago.
What's the capacity?
It's a 1 million gallon per day plant.
That must be why we no longer get mud in the tub.
I hope you're not getting mud in the tub.
We used to.
Really? But I'm gonna take that saying. That sounded nice. Like, I mean, not to have mud in the tub, but mud in the tub. I don't know, there's something that rings there. So the West Point water system, I was mentioning the master plan earlier. You know, we do master plans anywhere from 5 to 10 years in duration between master plans. The 2005 master plan really identified a lot of improvements that needed to happen in West Point. And a lot of those improvements were made. A lot of new upsized water lines, a lot of new fire hydrants. There was an incredible amount of, in some ways you can almost say it's a whole brand new system after that 2005 master plan. The more recent 2018 master plan really focused on that, the storage component. That's why we went after that Bummerville, enlarging that, because that was the next thing that the master plan identified. The distribution system was in good shape. Now we need to have that storage reliability. And that right there is just I've been utilizing some GIS stuff to show heat maps of all the fire hydrants. And so this is zoomed in, but when you zoom this out and see the whole county, I've got these heat maps that show all the different service areas. So I don't have it outlined, but you'll see like Ebbets Pass, which is an enormous system. It's our largest system. It just glows in the scheme of Calaveras County. So this is just zoomed in. This is all the fire hydrants that are throughout your community. I'm going to touch, a lot of these slides too I will utilize for when we go down and talk to folks in Sacramento, some of the legislators, to tell them about our rural systems, and they don't understand the type of environment that we operate in, the type of environment we live in. A lot of them don't really understand truly where their water comes from. So I'm constantly using some of these fire maps in the history to really show them that this is our home, this is where we live, this is some of the challenges we are facing up in these rural areas. And you can see, so this is all the fires from 1978 to, I think it's actually to 2025. I don't know if there's a few that I noticed were missing. And so then I zoomed in on that map just kind of for the West Point area in particular. Fires span decades, beginning with the 1951 Peterson fire, followed by the 1965 PG&E number 3 fire. And I've noticed throughout the county, there's a lot of just PG&E number, this fire, number 3, number 4, so they weren't too creative with those numbering systems. I don't know where the 1 and 2 is, but there's several of them. All the way up to the 22, Electra fire, which actually was in much of the same footprint as the 2015 Butte fire. With a fire history in mind, that brings us to the wildland-urban interface. I know earlier in the presentations we talked a lot about I'm going to call it the WUI, but it's the wildland-urban interface. The WUI is defined as areas where homes and communities and infrastructure are located in or next to wildland vegetation, creating a zone where people, buildings, and fire-prone landscape directly intersect. And again, I use this same map to show our county. Every single one of Calaveras County Water District service areas are in the WUI, every single one. And you can see the entire West Point service area as well is in that WUI. And for sometimes when we're applying for these grants, we use this status, which helps us, again, tell that story and really encourage the funding for some of this fire suppression and water infrastructure.
What does the lighter colors indicate?
So the blue is just the outline, so that's the wildland-urban interface. I should have probably given an outlook, to see all of California's, but it's again where basically there's a community and it intersects with the forest. For us, it's kind of like a, no duh. I grew up in Arnold and I know that, but there's a lot of folks that don't understand that. They don't understand that we butt right up to, forest, and which is why we're here today to talk about home hardening and, and fire. So some of the challenges, we operate in a much, much different landscape than some of our neighboring urban water agencies, which is another tricky thing to communicate. People think all water agencies are the same. All the water comes out of your faucet, it's all wet, so it's got to be the same, but it's not. And the infrastructure that gets it to your faucet is very, very different than, let's say, a Stockton or anywhere in the Valley or the Bay Area. Some of the main challenges for us as a water district is that fire risk management, water quality, supply reliability, and of course emergency response.
On that supply reliability, do you do any research on groundwater levels in your area?
Only in that lower section where we're part of the Sigma, where we're part of that groundwater subbasin. All the other groundwater monitoring throughout is not really a jurisdiction of ours. We have to, in that first map I showed you where I talked about the groundwater, we do monitoring there. We have test wells down there. But in this area, we don't do any groundwater monitoring. And so, most of California is put in these fire severity zones, very high, high, and moderate. Looks like I spelled moderate. Or actually, I didn't, just the E got taken off down there. Sorry, typo. And again, back to the West Point area. And so this is that GIS layer, and this is the moderate fire severity zones around the town of West Point. This is the high fire severity zones, and this is what is classified as the very high fire severity zones.
Who created those?
This is just an open source GIS layer. This is actually through CAL FIRE.
CAL FIRE drew those lines.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then you can get them, again, up right there too, through the FRAP, CAL FIRE map. This particular one's 2023, but these maps are updated constantly through open source, just GIS layering. Here are some fires in our community that I have experienced firsthand, and then I have really shaped my understanding of how water systems and wildfire intersect. This map shows fires and the relation to the Ebbets Pass service area. Those yellow and green are a lot of the different fuels reduction projects and the fuel breaks that from several different agencies. I really want to give a shout out to the Cal-Am team and their strategic way of connecting those fuel breaks. I mean, we all recognize that large-scale fuel breaks and fuels reduction projects are huge, and some of those are pretty large, some of those are small, but some of those small ones are connecting the large ones, and that's the strategic way of really creating a fuel break. So that blue is our Ebbets Pass service area. And so you see like the Old Gulch Fire, the Darby Fire, Butte Fire, all encroached and came very close to that. I'm going to start with the Old Gulch Fire. Now, I was not a water guy at the time. I was getting ready to go into high school, and all of a sudden, I'm excited to go to high school, and all of a sudden, the Old Gulch Fire pops up like about a week before I'm going to go to high school. I'm already nervous, got to go to high school. And we get evacuated. So all of Arnold, everything got evacuated. We had to take all of our pets, all of our stuff, and go up to Bear Valley and stay for a few nights. So it really was shocking. It was really scary. It was the first time I really experienced anything like that, and I'll never, ever forget it. And as I worked later on, I worked with several of the guys, and the water guys that were what I call like the OG guys, they worked through that fire and told me stories of it. And then we have the Darby Fire. Basically, it was September 5th through the 16th in 2001. And I think a lot of people, what I've noticed, have some kind of story of where they were on 9/11. And I'll never forget that day either. That day, that morning, we were all huddled at our main yard around the hood of a truck, seeing what was happening as the Twin Towers. And meanwhile, this Darby Fire is just raging. I mean, we were all just had no sleep, working around the clock. And then, we wake up that morning and see the horrible, horrible news. But this was kind of my first, I'd only been working at CCWD for a few months, and so this was my first real exposure to what the water system, what it goes through. And rapidly, firefighters from all over the country were deployed here. And we were just seeing leaks like crazy. In some of our service area, we have 200 to 300 PSI. And you had professionals, just shutting the hydrants really quick, filling up stuff, and slamming it. It causes a water hammer. So we were just going leak after leak after leak after leak to fix it because we had to keep that water going. So it was really challenging until we really started to communicate with the fire folks and say, hey, let's coordinate this. Let us tell you some of the more ideal spots for you to pull off the water. Intimately knowing the system, it really made a difference. That communication is crucial during a fire event. But this one really just opened my eyes, And I started off with September 11th, but it was really on September 7th, all of the 3/4 mile flume had been completely destroyed. And 10,000 customers in Murphy's and Angels Camp were completely cut off of water. And this is a section of that flume. It's an old photo, kind of grainy, but you can see that's what's called the 3/4 mile flume, completely burned. And at that time, CCWD was a member agency with Utica and City of Angels and UPUD. And it was just all hands on deck. The 2001 Darby fire really highlighted the vulnerabilities in our water systems. It burned 14,000 acres and damaged over 3,500 feet of wooden flume, ditch, and disrupted the water conveyance. And I use this one as an example too. I think nowadays the big topic I notice is like the mega fires. Everyone's talking about fires and the acreage burned, and a 1 million acre fire is enormous, but in the grand scheme of things, a 14,000 acre fire is really, in today's standards, considered a small fire, but it was devastating. It was 10 months without water for those communities. So a small fire can be just as devastating to communities like ours. It doesn't have to be a huge fire. But again, it was all hands on deck, and as I was researching some of this, this is where we had to start deploying personnel, and actually my wife found this report, and as I looked through it, I realized that was me. I was the new guy, and they just stuck me on this hydrant because, I had really nice guys like with that really sweet mullet there. I mean, it's a classic mullet. But so what we started doing was, okay, how are we going to get water down to Angels Camp? How are we going to get water to Murphy's? It was hard for us from up this high to get water to Angels, so CPUD was starting to think of plans of how to get water. So all the water agencies in the area was, again, all hands on deck. How are we going to do this? Meanwhile, the fire is just raging, and so this is what's going on in the water system in the background.
And there were no air resources, right? Because they were all grounded because of 9/11 at that time, for a while.
That is a fact. I'm going to look into that. I didn't think of that.
Remember, my dad was on that fire, and he was like, all of a sudden, the air resources, they just stopped them because of 9/11.
Right.
We were all on the ground having to fight fire with no air resources.
Nationwide.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. No, that's a good point. So yeah, we were filling up water tenders like crazy and taking it down the hill, and they were taking it down to basically the forebay, and so this could go into the ditch system and feed the town of Murphy's. I mean, and these trucks were going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because at that point it was the only thing. And then what we've discovered was in Forest Meadows, there was an old easement kind of back road that went down to the treatment plant for UPUD, which is Murphy's. And so we started running fire lines from our fire hydrants up there down there. We had to issue several different conservation orders because now we're trying to feed our own system for day-to-day use for homes, which is what the system's primarily designed for, but then also the firefighting efforts, other water tenders, firefighters, and then also trying to feed another community. So it really put the strain on the system. We were able to keep it together, but it took a lot of coordination. And again, our systems are zones, so you might be able to pull off a lot more water in this zone. A couple streets over, it might come off a different tank. It might not be able to feed as much. So that's why that coordination is absolutely crucial. Finally, they were able to kind of dam up where the flume wasn't damaged, installed 2 6-inch high-pressure pumps and 5,000 feet of 10-inch temporary line. And these pumps, again, ran 24/7. I think there's a few stories of them actually burning up and having to be replaced, but these were just nonstop. I mean, again, water is a 24/7 thing. And so that's a shot of the 3/4 mile flume. You can see the pipeline that had to bypass over it. So once this pipeline was in place, the water tenders and some of the other connections weren't as crucial, but this was still very vulnerable. And again, this went on for 10 months. The Butte Fire. Butte Fire, I'm sure most of you remember that one. That was a very fast-moving wildfire in 2015. It started on September 8th in Amador County. There was 2 deaths, 475 residents burned, 343 outbuildings, 45 structures, and the total cost of fighting that fire at the time was $74.7 million, which is roughly $100 million in today's dollars. This one, I remember that fire very well too. Same thing, you know, it got very, very close to Sheep Ranch. And so this is a project that we completed in 2022 where we worked very closely with the county and we installed a 125,000 gallon fire suppression water tank. It's just raw water. Right there on the left is our only tank for Sheep Ranch. And again, Sheep Ranch is small, that's the clear well as well. So the water can't flow through there. It's got to reach that contact time. And so this was a great project, and this was kind of because of the Butte Fire. So during the Butte Fire, it was really a challenge to keep water at Sheep Ranch because there was no power. And so when the community has no power, our water systems have no power. We have generators, but generators, they break, they need fuel, they need all that stuff. So we were constantly getting in there. But then I remember the day when we were going to go down there and put some more fuel in the generator, and Highway Patrol and the fire folks said, nope, nobody's going in there. And so we were, for safety, which is a good thing, but we were basically locked out of getting to that area. So the generator, we just let it run. It eventually ran out of fuel, and the water level got down to almost nothing. By the time we were able to get in there, the fire had been put out, and they protected Sheep Ranch. But this is a great piece of infrastructure because of that incident. There's actually a purple fire hydrant right downstream from that. When you see a purple hydrant, that means it's non-potable, and it's just for fire use. The irony of this is we had a ribbon cutting when this tank was done, and on the day of the ribbon cutting, a fire started up on Armstrong Road. No joke. There was water tenders pulling off. It was an escaped. Somebody let one of their fires just escape. And here we are, have this ribbon cutting. I mean, we couldn't have planned that. I won't want to say any better, but it worked out in an interesting way. That here's this great fire suppression tank. Then a real fire started, and it was used that very day. One of the more recent Calaveras fires that came too close for comfort for CCWD in the community of Copperopolis was the Arrow Fire. On June 17th, 2024 at 3:29 p.m., a wildfire broke out near Arrow Road and Hunt Road in Copperopolis. Within hours, it spread from 30 acres to over 5,000 acres, forcing evacuations. By nightfall, 5,100 people had evacuated, and Highway 4, along with several other local roads were shut down. Thousands lost power, and like I said a second ago, when the community loses power, so does our water and sewer systems. And so that blue is the copper service area. That is the footprint of the Arrow Fire. Here is that same footprint, and that is the old town of Copperopolis. And this is kind of a Where's Waldo picture. There's a water tank in there, and that water tank is right there. So I have a little bit of footage here. This is some footage from our staff, kind of that boots on the ground from that day.
Yeah, he just was making a circle and getting a spotter.
So at one point too, with that power outage, we also started to lose communications to the tank to where we had to physically see the level. And that's when we deployed electricians and our mechanics out there to get those comms back so we can see and keep the level at the appropriate, if we had to fire off pumps automatically, so these guys are actually at the tank site while it's burning around them to make sure we're keeping water in that tank for the firefighting efforts.
There's fire everywhere around this tank. The main concern is trying to keep it out of town.
Yeah, so that day, like the Darby fire, like the Butte fire, this is another day that I'll never forget, both which I personally worked on day and night to keep our water systems flowing. In this particular fire, I was in this new position where I was in the EOC, more on the communication side of things, but really gives you a perspective here. When disaster strikes, I can tell you our crews don't just step up, they really lean in. They return to work without hesitation. This fired off after everybody had went home. One call, everybody's calling to come back. Not just the crew that works in copper. Every crew is like, what can I do? What do you need? We're here. They haul generators. They fuel them. They monitor the tanks. They keep the pump stations going. They coordinate with fire personnel, doing whatever it takes to keep the water flowing with whatever power we have. So in the aftermath, our director of operations kind of gives an overview too, and this will give you a perspective. I think he'll do a good job explaining it.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Damon Wyckoff. I'm the Director of Operations for the Calaveras County Water District. Behind me here is our Coppertown tank. So this was directly impacted, as you can see, from the Arrow fire. Hats off to CAL FIRE and the first responders for saving this tank site. This tank site is critically important to Old Town Copperopolis, and we're just truly indebted to the first responders and to CAL FIRE for keeping this tank in service. It provides water supply also to Town Square, so it's critically important in the overall water supply for the community of Copperopolis. As you can see, bolted steel tanks weather wildfires much better than redwood tanks do, and the district over the years has worked to replace all but one of their redwood tanks throughout all of our service areas. And so this is clearly an indication of why welded steel or bolted steel tanks are important to the overall potable water supply for all of our service areas. Once again, Coppertown tank, Old Town Copperopolis.
Do you have a different set of pollutants that you're interested in?
So this is our Reed's Turnpike pump station.
Absolutely.
Our Reed's Turnpike pump station conveys water from our C zone, which is in this direction here to the west, into Old Town Copperopolis to what's called Copper Tank. And as you can see, we have a generator here because there was no power during the Arrow fire to allow us to use this pump station to push water from C into Copper Tank. And so this generator proved critically important in continuing to convey water to Copper Tank so that CAL FIRE could pull water from Copper Tank to protect the immediate Old Town Copperopolis. And so this is a critically important potable water pump station, and just hats off to our distribution and our electricians and all the crews that worked to put this generator online and to keep this pump station going throughout the duration of the Arrow fire. Great job.
Do you wish to ask for questions at some point, or you just want to take sporadic questions?
I can do either. There's not too much left. I can finish up and then I can take questions.
I am here in the Copper Cove Water Treatment Facility in Copperopolis, and my request to you here in the community of Copperopolis is that you please conserve water. We are coming out of the midst of the Arrow fire, and I just would ask that you be sensitive to the fact that there has been a considerable amount of water use in your community, and that as we push forward towards normalcy, I would ask that you can conserve water as much as possible. That will allow CAL FIRE to continue to do the excellent work that they are doing and allow CCWD to continue to provide you with safe, potable, healthy, reliable water service. Thank you.
So really quick, a few of the things that happened there with why he's having that message is, the fire had been pretty much contained, and the fire folks went into like what they call mop-up, right? And so, most of the air, it was fought by the air primarily, and then during that mop-up is when they really started filling up the water tenders. And not only that, during the evacuation, we had dozens and dozens and dozens of people just flip on sprinklers and leave. And there was reports of water just running down the road. And that's difficult because that also drains the pressure, drains the system, and it actually kind of robs some of the water to the fire professionals. And so we really stress to leave the firefighting to the fire professionals. Certainly not going to tell anyone how to protect their home or not protect their home. But in that case, there was systems that weren't affected by the fire that were actually pulling water away from that work effort. And then the water use really increased once they started to repopulate the area, and they were still in that mop-up phase because they were pulling water from the fire hydrants and going out, for instance, Hunt Road to do all that work to start putting out the hot spots. And so, we never ran out of water, but our operators and they on pins and needles all night long, keeping that water going. Again, I'm going to wrap up, and I'll gladly get some questions. And this is another one from last year. This is actually a watch duty screenshot from September 2nd of 2025, showing the lightning event that was unfolding in real time. I'm not sure if any of you guys remember that one, but that was crazy. Within a very short window, the map filled with alerts of dozens of fires ignited almost simultaneously across the region. It captures really how quickly this situation escalated. These were the individual fires that were later identified from that lightning event. At least 13 separate fires were burning at the same time near Murphy's and Copperopolis and were grouped into the TCU Lightning Complex fire. This heat map was later on in the day and kind of showed the concentration of those fires. Our system in Copperopolis and our sewer systems were well within the footprint of the fires. We were very scared. Our treatment plant was getting very close to our treatment plant in Copper again. And then luckily, as far as Vallecito and Douglas Flat, it was getting close to those sewer systems, but it really impacted our neighbor agency, UPUD, Union Public Utility District, and MSD and Murphy's. And as water agencies, we have mutual aid agreements with agencies like UPUD and several of the other agencies. So when something like this happens, we're on the phone calling, what can we do? What kind of resources can we provide? And that every fire I've been on, that's how it is. The water agencies, we might have separate water agencies, but we really band together for the community. At that point, there's no separate agencies. It's the community focused. And that's what happened during this. This is some documentation that some of the local water agencies put together. This was in collaboration with CCWD, UPUD, TUD. But basically, really after those LA fires a year or two ago, and some of the news, saying a fire hydrant went dry and this and that, it really created quite the stir and kind of some unrealistic expectations of a water system. And so, like I said, every fire is different. Our fire hydrants are there for fire protection, and they're there to aid in fire protection, but they're not designed for a whole subdivision on fire, hundreds of homes. Another thing that happened with those LA fires, picture a home being on fire, all the plumbing burns. And I have colleagues that worked in those, and they showed me pictures where it just looked like a sprinkler because the home burns, and all of a sudden the water's live, and so now water's just squirting out at dozens and dozens and dozens of homes, which what it does is it depletes that. So they had their staff on the front lines just turning off water like crazy. So when you see the headlines of a fire hydrant dry, I don't think they're really giving you the whole context or the whole story. I mean, those fires were insane, and no water system is designed to fight that style of fire. That was something else. That was tragedy. So we put together just kind of some of these perspectives on that and kind of what to expect with a fire system, just to give you that understanding. So you can give that QR code if you'd like, and I can share it with you later also. And Aqua, it's another agency that really supports all water agencies along California, and we kind of all banded together for that kind of same messaging, just so the public understands, and I can tell you firsthand, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but every fire is unique, and it puts different demands on the system depending on that actual fire. So that is really the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sticking around. I appreciate it, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Regarding our water pressure here in West Point, from our local West Point storage and pumps. As long as there's PG&E power, those pumps will run off of PG&E power. The instant that stops, those pumps will still run off your emergency electrical generators supplied by fuel. How much fuel have you got? How many hours do we expect the West Point to keep water pressure here based on your emergency power supply?
Again, there's no just set number on that. I mean, a generator, just like your vehicle, if you're running at 80 miles all the time, you're going to burn more fuel. So it depends on the load. So it depends on the demand on the system. Yes, we have generators. We've gotten really good the last several years. Back to the hazard mitigation grant. We've been working on a grant since 2019 for emergency generators. It's been one of the slowest grants ever, but we finally got it. We finally have the generators. They're on site. They're at our yard, and we're going to start deploying those and get rid of...
The question was for a number of hours. You expect us to have power from your emergency supply. 1, 2, 3, 4. What do you think?
Well, like I said, it just really depends. It depends on what zone the fire is in, too. And so, I mean, there's going to be different generators at different treatment. You know, if it's in this zone and a different tank can feed it, and we're not really having to pump to there, it's dependent. I can't just say 10 hours.
Well, we got those 2 steel tanks you showed us on top of Smitty Hill. They are steel, right? Not
Yep.
plastic.
Yep. All West Point has steel tanks. We only have 1 redwood tank left. We have replaced 10 redwood tanks in the system over the last few years. So there's 1 left.
Reassure me, you do have emergency gasoline-driven pumps there to supply electrical energy for your pressure.
Yes, diesel.
And
Yeah.
they might last a few hours if we're lucky.
A few days. I mean,
Days? That's
oh
great.
yeah. No, I mean, we had one during that storm, the February Stormageddon. I mean, I live in Arnold, and I've lived in Arnold for 47 years. I've never seen a storm like that. I've never seen that much damage. I had 6 trees just on my property, and I only have 1/3 of an acre. We couldn't get to one of our tanks. We lost all comm, and so we were able to partner with a local agency, get a snowcat, get up there, because we were worried, because we didn't have eyes on it. We didn't know how much fuel was in there, because this tank's in the middle of the woods, and it had been already running for a week. We were getting very nervous. We kind of knew we could calculate it, but again, load dependent. We got up there, and there was still half a tank. It could have gone for easily another week, but it's just that not knowing. So what I can reassure you is our staff will do everything in their power to get fuel there. We take a lot of pride in that, not just during fire, but again, in those winter storm, we had very few customers out of water. We had dozens and dozens, probably hundreds of people that had no power, were running out of heat, no internet, but we kept water to the majority of those homes. Not in this, no, we have gravity to an extent, but what we have to do here in Calaveras County is pump water up to these tanks to where they gravity down.
Yes.
So they're gravity to an extent, but for instance, the Ebbets Pass system, we pump water over 2,000 feet in a series of 12 pump stations, basically. So we have gravity to an extent, again, but to create that gravity environment, we need backup generators. We need energy.
Kelly, can I contribute a comment?
Please.
Because I've asked that same question a couple times, and most recently, Damon Wyckoff, a couple years ago, estimated that the West Point water treatment plant could go for 2 to 3 days on the fuel reserves that they have there.
Just without refueling.
Correct.
Okay.
And our concern was if the roads were blocked or lost, what would happen then? But that's another
Yeah,
story.
which talks about the regulatory. I mean, we can't just store. There's really restrictions on storing fuel on site too. So I mean, we constantly there's a saying that we have in the water business, the regulatory circular wheel, and fire and water quality really plays in that, and that's something we try to talk about with our lawmakers too. We're expected to have enough water to have enough fire flow. That's very important. Water degrades, water gets old. The quality, you can't have water sitting for that long. Then we have to flush it. And so there's that balance of enough water and also water quality. And it makes it almost, I wouldn't say impossible, but a constant challenge to have both those in sync. And these are all regulations, just, I mean, it breaks my heart with a system like the Ebbets Pass to where we spend all this money to pump the water up to the end of the system to keep that furthest fire hydrant pressurized and ready to go because you don't know when the fire is going to start. And then the water quality starts to get old and you have to flush it. And so That's part of the rural water agency situation we're in here, you know.
Where do you flush it to? What do you use the water for that you have to purge?
Well, it depends. A lot of times, I mean, we do try to coordinate with the fire department as best we can if they have some training exercises, but sometimes their training exercises aren't in the ideal spot, like a dead end of a line where the water really needs to be flushed.
Okay.
So a lot of times we just have to go out and just flush it.
Okay.
Yeah.
After neutralizing the chlorine.
Yes, and so we do. We put dechlor tabs in there. Yep, and it takes out the chlorine. So which is another tragic thing. We put all this chlorine in, but then we got to take it back out. Yeah.
For your water and for your infrastructure improvements, like the West Point wastewater plant improvement and then the water tanks at She Branch, are you guys able to do all of that with your own resources, or do you have to contract it out and use like other businesses or companies?
Those types of projects are contracted out. You know, we have to go through the bidding process. For the West Point Wilseyville wastewater consolidation, it was a local contractor. It was KW Emerson. So we're always, you know, happy to work with local contractors. We do a lot of work with Mazingo. I don't remember the contractor for the Sheep Ranch tank.
But you prioritize local contractors?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm always happy when we get local contractors, but we can't do that. I mean, ours has to be the best. You know, we're a public agency, so it's going to be that lowest bid. I was just saying my own personal. I love seeing a local contractor work. You know, we have good relationships with them, but no, we can't.
You can't just choose.
No. Yeah.
What was the quantity of biosolids from the closure of the Wilseyville pond?
I don't know, but it's funny. I did ask if I can talk about that one, but since we kept this one more Firewise, it's really interesting. The new facility is amazing. They just have giant septic tanks because a lot of the West Point community is on septic too. And so we have to have special ways. You know, traditional sewer is treated much differently than septic. And so there was an old cesspool pond up there at Wilseyville, and now it all comes to just one central location. But I'm not sure the amount exactly. I don't have that number.
Folks, Kelly will be here to take all your sewage questions a little later, but we've had an awful lot of good information today, which has predictably stretched our schedule out a little bit. And I'd like to introduce Trina Wally from the Resource Conservation District of Calaveras County. I'd like to thank Kelly for an excellent production. How do you want to handle AV? You want to?
I have a PowerPoint, so I'm going to give this to him so he can get me hooked up.
Here, I'm going to get you hooked up back on yours. Just
okay. Kelly, can you handle that?
Oh man, I'm driving a different machine here.
What's your official job?
So I'm Trina Wally. I'm the Executive Director at the Resource Conservation District, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do. But I also have Kaylee Tanner here to represent us. She's our Forest Health Project Coordinator. And then Walter Tryon, who is our Working Land Resource Conservation Tech. Well, my voice is louder. I'm not going to take a lot of time on my presentation. Actually, Kelly's presentation was a really good setup for the next part. But I do want to kind of give you an overview so that what I really want to do, and hopefully we can use the rest of our time for, is I want to break up into two smaller groups, a table over there and a table here, to go through some just roundtable discussions. And instead of hearing a lot of presentation from me, we want to hear from you and the community and what some of your priorities are. So where's the arrow button? Is it on this one? There we go. So I commonly find that most people don't know what a resource conservation district is. So we are a special district, similar to a school district or a fire district, except we specifically work with various natural resources. So we're focused on improving natural and working lands. Wildfire, of course, is a key concern up here, and so the RCD has continued to make that top priority. But what we do, big picture wise, we look at watershed protection. So we do have a newly formed watershed committee that's been meeting for the last year, looking at some of the watershed priorities. We do have just launched, we just took our first water quality monitoring last month for our Water Watch of Calaveras. And then planning for various wetlands restoration projects. And you might think like, well, why do we really care about wetlands restoration? And how does that relate to fire? A restored wetland provides a wet fuel break. And so a lot of those meadows that we may have had at one time, if we can restore them and move the encroachment of the trees back a little further, it actually provides just a natural functioning fuel break. Working lands, working with our farmers and ranchers, mostly ranchers up here, to do improvements on their rangeland. And then of course, wildfire resiliency. We're doing a lot with the home hardening and defensible space. We have 2 staff members that are able to go out and do defensible space inspections. We're working with the Firewise committee, who is the committee that oversees the Firewise Calaveras Festival. That will be October 17th this year at Ironstone Vineyards. And then we do 75% of our work, because it sounds like we do a lot, which we do, but 75% of our budget is dedicated to fuels reduction. So what is fuels reduction? Basically, if you boil it down, it's reducing vegetation density to reduce the chance of wildfire ignition, reduce fire intensity, enable the firefighters easier access to contain wildfire, lower the cost of firefighting in the event that it occurs, increase safety and quality of life. So, and like I said, Kelly's maps were great, kind of set the scene. Here's another one that can be found on the Calaveras County Community Info Center. What you see here is the various fuel breaks that are throughout the county. And so you'll see that there's the big open space there around West Point. So we're doing our best to try to work with other agencies like the Cal-Am forestry team. We've been meeting with other UMRA. There's another group that's working on forest land, the Amador Calaveras Consensus Group. So there's a lot of groups that are working in this area. So we try to make sure that Calaveras is represented as best as possible. And we've started to receive community input, which wasn't something that we did before. We always brought projects to the table that were recommended by other entities. But we want to open that further up into having community input and hearing from landowners. And so this was one of the first ones that was submitted to us by Rick here to represent West Point. And so these are 2 areas that we've started to study to put together some fuels reduction projects to protect the town of West Point. So we've kind of named it the West Point Wildfire Defense System. I believe the blue outlined one takes advantage of a previously established fire line that I think was for the Butte Fire, correct, if I remember correctly. And so we're taking that fire line and expanding it so that if a fire did come back through, that it would function and also provide that access again to our firefighters.
Trina?
Yes.
Can I just add that the project that you just described, which is the light blue outline, that's based on a proposal from Fire Chief Mike Downs and our battalion chief, Steve Hewlett.
So, but I also wanted to set the stage of expectations. And I pulled up some nice little pictures here of a before and after for one of our projects. But this process can take up to 5 years. So you've got your concept proposal, which is where we're at right now, right? We've got the idea, we've got the map started. We've got to seek and secure funding, because to really get out there and do any work on the ground, we have to get landowner approvals. And then we also have to get out there and do archaeological and biological surveys, because a lot of our funding is tied to state funds that require us to go through the CEQA process. And so once we can go through that CEQA process, we can finalize the treatment units, and then we can actually almost get on the ground, because then we are a special district, we are a public agency, so we also have to go through the public bidding process. And then once the public bidding process happens, then we can get out there and start implementing. So there's a lot of steps that have to happen. The big one being seeking and securing that funding, because those studies and the work is can be quite expensive. So with that, setting the expectation, I think we need community input from you.